The cameras were still rolling when he destroyed her. Standing at the altar in her ivory wedding dress, Lena Carter watched the man she'd loved for 3 years turn to face 200 guests and announce that he couldn't possibly marry someone so far beneath his family's standards. Every flash, every whisper, every pitying stare, captured forever. But what happened next on those cathedral steps would change everything. Because sometimes the worst moment of your life is exactly when fate intervenes. If you want to see how revenge becomes redemption, stay until the end. Like this video and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. Miss. The autumn wind cut through Lena's veil before Marcus Wellington even opened his mouth, but she told herself it was just nerves. Every bride felt this way, didn't they? That flutter of uncertainty, that whisper of doubt that maybe, just maybe, something fundamental was wrong. She'd been telling herself that same lie for months. The Cathedral of St. Catherine rose behind them like a monument to old money and older traditions, its Gothic spires piercing a sky that couldn't decide between gray and darker gray. 200 guests filled the pews inside. Marcus's colleagues from the law firm, his parents' political connections, the society women who'd spent 3 years teaching Lena which fork to use and how to laugh at jokes that weren't funny. Lena had no one. Her parents were gone. Her friends from the diner where she'd worked through college had received invitations, but they'd known better than to come. This wasn't their world. It barely felt like hers. "You look beautiful," her wedding planner whispered, adjusting the simple ivory dress Lena had chosen after Marcus's mother made it clear that anything more elaborate would be trying too hard. The dress cost more than Lena used to make in 6 months, but somehow it still felt plain next to the cathedral's grandeur. Through the open doors, Lena could see Marcus standing at the altar in his custom Tom Ford tuxedo, looking every inch the golden boy his parents had raised him to be. Tall, handsome in that effortless way wealthy men often were, with the kind of confident smile that came from never having to wonder if you belonged. Lena had fallen in love with that smile 3 years ago when he'd walked into the diner during a thunderstorm, his expensive suit soaked through, laughing at himself for forgetting an umbrella. He'd sat in her section and asked about her day like he actually cared, like she was someone worth caring about. She'd believed him. "It's time," the wedding planner said, pressing the bouquet of white roses into Lena's trembling hands. "Remember, slow steps, smile. This is your moment." Lena's moment. Right. She started down the aisle alone, no father to give her away, no family to cry proud tears. The string quartet played Pachelbel's Canon in D, the same song played at every society wedding, as if grief could be standardized along with everything else. Every step felt heavier than the last. The guests watched her with expressions Lena had learned to read over 3 years of trying to fit into Marcus's world. Curiosity, mostly. Judgment, definitely. That particular combination of fascination and disapproval reserved for the girl from nowhere who'd somehow caught the Wellington air. Marcus's mother sat in the front row wearing navy blue. Not the traditional mother of the groom beige, because Margaret Wellington never did anything traditionally unless it served her purposes. Her face was set in that perfectly neutral expression she'd perfected over decades of charity galas and political fundraisers. The expression that revealed nothing while somehow communicating complete disdain. Lena's hands tightened on the bouquet. Just get through this, she told herself. Once they were married, it wouldn't matter anymore. She'd officially be a Wellington. She'd belong. She'd been telling herself that lie, too. Marcus watched her approach with an expression she couldn't quite read. Was that nervousness in his eyes? Second thoughts? But then he smiled, that same smile from the diner, and Lena felt her doubts begin to dissolve like sugar in hot tea. She reached the altar. The string quartet faded into silence. Reverend Thompson opened his leather-bound Bible, his voice carrying easily through the cathedral's perfect acoustics. "Dearly beloved," wait. The word cut through the ceremony like a knife through silk. Marcus's voice, clear and steady, and completely wrong, the Reverend stopped mid-sentence. 200 guests collectively inhaled. Lena's bouquet trembled in her hands. Marcus turned to face the crowd, his shoulders squared like he was about to deliver a closing argument. "I apologize for the interruption, Reverend Thompson, but I can't do this." The words didn't make sense at first. They were English. Lena understood English. But strung together like that, they became a foreign language. Marcus? Her voice sounded small even to her own ears. What are you? I'm sorry, Lena. He still wasn't looking at her. His eyes were fixed on his mother in the front row, seeking approval the way he'd been seeking it his entire life. I've tried to make this work, tried to convince myself that love was enough, but I can't marry someone so fundamentally beneath my family's standards. The cathedral erupted in whispers. Cell phones appeared from designer purses and suit pockets, cameras already recording, social media posts already being drafted. In the front row, Margaret Wellington's neutral expression cracked just enough to reveal the smallest smile of satisfaction. Lena stood frozen, every word landing like a physical blow, beneath his family's standards. 3 years. 3 years of etiquette lessons and charity luncheons, of learning to shrink herself down to fit into spaces not designed for girls who'd served coffee for tips. 3 years of pretending Marcus's friend's casual cruelty was just teasing, that his mother's constant criticism was helpful guidance, that the way they looked at her, like something tracked in on someone's shoe, was all in her imagination. 3 years of believing that if she just tried hard enough, changed enough, became enough, she could transform into someone worthy of standing at this altar. The differences in our backgrounds, Marcus continued, still addressing the crowd like this was a press conference instead of a wedding. The cultural gap, the educational disparity. I have a degree, Lena's voice cracked. I'm starting law school in the fall. You know that. You helped me study for the LSAT. From a state school. His mother's voice cut across the cathedral, sharp and clear. Paid for with scholarships and loans, not family legacy. There's a difference, dear. The dear was pure acid. Lena turned to Marcus, desperate for him to defend her, to remember the girl he'd loved in that diner 3 years ago, the girl he'd promised to build a life with. But he was still looking at his mother. I'm sorry, he said again, and this time he finally met Lena's eyes. What she saw there wasn't love or regret, or even anger, just relief. This is for the best. You'll understand eventually. The cameras kept rolling, the whispers got louder. Someone laughed, not cruelly exactly, just the nervous titter that escaped when witnessing something too awkward to process. Lena's carefully pinned veil slipped forward, obscuring her vision with tulle and scattered pearls. She pushed it back with shaking hands, her engagement ring. A modest princess cut that had seemed beautiful until she saw the rocks Marcus's cousins wore, catching the light from the stained glass windows. Marcus, please. She hated the begging in her voice, but she couldn't stop it. Can we just talk? Privately? This doesn't have to... It's already done, Lena. He took a step back, putting physical distance between them. My attorney will contact you about the apartment. You have 30 days to vacate. The apartment. Their apartment. The place she'd called home for 2 years, filled with furniture she'd helped pick out and photographs she'd carefully framed. 30 days to erase herself from his life like she'd never existed. Something inside Lena cracked. Not broke. Not yet. But developed a fissure that would eventually shatter everything. She looked out at the 200 faces watching her humiliation. Marcus's groomsmen avoided her gaze. The bridesmaids, his childhood friends who'd never quite accepted her, looked almost vindicated. The society women were already texting, spreading the news that the unsuitable girl from nowhere had been put back in her place. In the back of the cathedral, near the massive oak doors that led to the street, Lena saw a face she didn't recognize. A man in a dark suit standing in the shadows where the stained glass light didn't reach. He wasn't smiling like some of the guests or filming like others. He was just watching with an intensity that made Lena's skin prickle even through her numbness. Something about his stillness felt dangerous in a way that Marcus's public cruelty wasn't. I think you should leave, Margaret Wellington said, standing up from her front row seat with the practiced grace of someone who'd spent decades telling people where they didn't belong. Quietly, dear, you've caused enough of a scene. Lena had caused the scene. Right. She looked at Marcus one final time, searching for any trace of the man who'd held her during thunderstorms, and promised her that love could bridge any gap. But that man, if he'd ever existed, was gone. In his place stood a Wellington, doing what Wellingtons did best, protecting their own interests at any cost. Lena turned and ran. Her heels caught on the ivory fabric of her dress, tearing the hem as she stumbled up the aisle. The sound of ripping silk seemed impossibly loud in the cathedral's acoustics. Someone gasped. Someone else definitely laughed this time. She shoved through the oak doors and burst out onto the cathedral steps, the autumn air hitting her like a slap after the stuffy warmth inside. The steps were wide and gray and steep, stretching down to the street where a line of expensive cars waited to take the wedding party to a reception that would never happen. Lena made it halfway down before her legs gave out. She collapsed onto the cold stone, her torn dress pooling around her like spilled milk, her bouquet scattering white roses down the steps. The sobs came then, huge gasping things that tore out of her chest like they were trying to escape. Beneath his family's standards, the words played on repeat in her head, mixing with every other moment of the past 3 years that should have warned her. The time Marcus's father asked if she was planning to work after the wedding, like work was something shameful. The charity gala where Marcus's ex-girlfriend, old money, private schools, a trust fund the size of a small country's GDP, had looked at Lena's dress and said, "How brave of you to shop off the rack." The 1,000 small cruelties she'd convinced herself didn't matter because Marcus loved her. Marcus didn't love her. Maybe he never had. Maybe she'd just been a rebellion, a way to disappoint his parents before ultimately falling back in line. Maybe... Quite a performance in there. The voice came from behind her, smooth and low with an accent Lena couldn't quite place. Italian, maybe, though softened by years in America. She looked up, still half blind from tears, and saw the man from the back of the cathedral. Up close, he was more imposing than she'd realized, easily 6'2", with dark hair silvered at the temples and eyes that were almost black. His suit was perfectly tailored, his hands relaxed at his sides, his expression neutral except for something that might have been amusement playing at the corners of his mouth. "Who are you?" Lena managed, her voice wrecked from crying. "Adrian Moretti." He said it like she should recognize the name. When she just stared at him blankly, something shifted in his expression. Not disappointment exactly, but interest. "You really don't know, do you?" "Know what?" Lena pushed her veil back again, tried to gather the scattered pieces of her dignity. "Look, if you're friends with Marcus, you can tell him, I'm not friends with Marcus Wellington." Adrian's voice turned cold on the name. "Though I do know his family quite well. They owe me a considerable amount of money." That made Lena pause. "What?" $7 million to be precise." Adrian descended the steps until he was standing directly in front of her, close enough that Lena had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "From a development deal his father's company botched 3 years ago. They've been avoiding payment ever since." Lena tried to process this information through the fog of shock and humiliation. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm going to make you an offer." Adrian extended his hand, palm up, like he was inviting her to dance rather than sitting on cathedral steps in a torn wedding dress. "And I think you're angry enough right now to actually consider it." "I don't even know you." "No, but I know you, Lena Carter." He said her name like he'd said it 1,000 times before, each syllable perfectly formed. "I know you worked 60-hour weeks at that diner to put yourself through school. I know you scored in the 98th percentile on your LSAT, despite having no test prep money. I know you've been accepted to 3 law schools with full scholarships, and you were planning to defer your admission to support Marcus through his first year at his father's firm." The detail in his knowledge should have terrified her. Instead, it just made her tired. "So you had me investigated. Congratulations, you know I'm nobody." "On the contrary." Adrian crouched down so they were at eye level, his dark eyes fixed on hers with an intensity that made her earlier observation seem laughably understated. This man wasn't just dangerous, he was a predator, and Lena was very clearly prey. "You're exactly who I've been looking for." "For what?" "To be my wife." The words hung in the cold air between them. Somewhere in the distance, a car horn blared. Inside the cathedral, Lena could hear raised voices, probably Marcus's mother directing the cleanup of her son's mess. "You're insane," Lena said flatly. "Pragmatic." Adrian straightened, still offering his hand. "The Wellingtons won't pay me what they owe, but they will pay dearly to avoid the scandal of Marcus's jilted bride marrying their biggest rival within a week of her humiliation." "Rival?" "I own half the development contracts in this city that they don't. I have connections they've spent decades trying to cultivate. And unlike them, I don't particularly care about old money rules or social acceptance. His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. I care about results. Lena stared at him, trying to find the angle, the con, the trap. Why would you possibly want to marry me? You could have anyone. I could have anyone who wants my money, yes, but what I need is someone who wants revenge. Adrian's eyes glittered with something dark and promising. Someone who knows exactly how cruel the Wellingtons can be. Someone who has nothing left to lose and everything to gain. I don't want revenge. Even as she said it, Lena felt the lie settle in her stomach like lead. Don't you? Adrian tilted his head slightly, studying her like she was a puzzle he was solving in real time. You don't want to walk back into every room that witnessed your humiliation today as Mrs. Adrian Moretti? You don't want to watch Marcus's face when he realizes what he lost? You don't want his mother to choke on every condescending word she's ever said to you? Yes. The answer roared through Lena's chest like wildfire. Yes, yes, yes. She wanted all of that and more. She wanted to burn down every polite smile that had hidden contempt. She wanted to destroy every whispered conversation that had dissected her inadequacies. She wanted Marcus to hurt the way she was hurting right now, collapsed on cathedral steps in a torn dress while cameras captured every second of her pain. But wanting something didn't make it possible. I have nothing, Lena said quietly. No money, no connections, no family. What could I possibly offer you in a marriage? Yourself. Adrian said it simply, like it was the most obvious answer in the world. Your intelligence, your strength, your ability to survive in a world designed to exclude you. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that made Lena's breath catch. And your willingness to stand beside me without asking me to be anything other than what I am. Which is what, exactly? Dangerous. Adrian didn't smile when he said it. Ruthless when necessary. Someone who makes his own rules and doesn't apologize for it. He extended his hand again, more insistent this time. I'm offering you power, Lena. Protection. A life where no one will ever again tell you that you're beneath their standards. In exchange for what? A year of your life. Publicly, we'll be married, attend events, present a united front, convince the Wellingtons that their rejection drove you straight into my arms. Privately, you'll have your own space, your own life. You'll start law school as planned. When the year ends, we'll divorce quietly. You'll receive a settlement substantial enough to ensure you never have to depend on anyone again. It was insane. Completely, absolutely insane. Lena looked down at her torn dress, her scattered bouquet, the cathedral steps where she'd just been publicly destroyed. She thought about the apartment she'd have to vacate in 30 days, the law school acceptance letters she'd probably have to turn down now that Marcus's financial support was gone, the future that had seemed so certain this morning and now stretched ahead of her like a desert, empty, barren, impossible to cross alone. She thought about Marcus's face when he told 200 people she was beneath him, his mother's satisfied smile, the cameras that had captured every second of her humiliation, probably already uploading to social media where the whole world could watch the unsuitable girl get put back in her place. Lena took Adrian Moretti's hand. His skin was warm despite the cold air, his grip firm without being forceful. He pulled her to her feet with easy strength, steadying her when she wobbled in her heels. I have conditions, Lena said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Adrian's mouth curved into something that was definitely a smile this time. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. I want everything in writing. A contract that specifies exactly what's expected of both of us. I want my own attorney to review it before I sign anything. Done. I want to finish law school. No interference, no expectations that I'll drop out or defer. I'll pay your tuition directly. Consider it a signing bonus. Lena's breath caught. That's not... You don't have to... I know. Adrian released her hand but stayed close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. But I will. What else? After the year, I want a clean break. No drama, no complications, no strings. Something flickered across Adrian's face too quickly for Lena to interpret. Agreed, though I reserve the right to change your mind about that timeline. You won't. We'll see. He He shrugged out of his suit jacket and draped it around Lena's shoulders, the fabric still warm from his body heat and smelling faintly of expensive cologne and something darker she couldn't name. "You're shivering. We should go." "Go where?" "To my attorney's office to draft your contract. Then to my home so you can change out of that dress. Then, I think, somewhere very public where we can be photographed together." Adrian's smile turned sharp. "I want Marcus Wellington to see the news before the sun sets." Lena looked back at the cathedral one last time. Through the stained glass windows, she could see shadows moving, the guests dispersing, the wedding party being ushered away, her humiliation being packaged into anecdotes for dinner parties and cautionary tales. "They're going to say terrible things about me," she said quietly. "That I'm a gold digger. That this is some kind of revenge plot." "They already say terrible things about you." Adrian's voice was matter-of-fact, almost kind. "At least this way, you'll have the power to make them regret it." He was right. The damage was already done. Her reputation in Marcus's circles was destroyed the moment he'd announced she was beneath his standards. She could slink away and disappear, prove them right about her inadequacy. Or she could take Adrian's hand and become someone they couldn't dismiss. Someone they couldn't destroy. "1 year," Lena said firmly. "1 year," Adrian agreed. "Starting now." He led her down the cathedral steps to a black Mercedes waiting at the curb, its engine already running. A driver in matching black emerged to open the rear door, his face carefully neutral as he took in Lena's torn dress and tear-stained makeup. Lena paused at the car door, suddenly aware of how completely her life had just pivoted. This morning she'd woken up as Lena Carter, soon to be Wellington. She'd had a plan, a future, a place she was supposed to belong. Now she was climbing into a stranger's car, agreeing to marry a man she'd met 15 minutes ago, making decisions based entirely on fury and desperation and the burning need to prove that she was more than what Marcus's family had reduced her to. "Having second thoughts?" Adrian asked as he settled into the seat beside her. Lena looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time. He was handsome in a way that Marcus wasn't, all sharp edges and controlled danger where Marcus had been soft and safe. There was nothing safe about Adrian Moretti, nothing predictable or comfortable or easy, but there was something honest in his directness. He told her exactly what he was, dangerous, ruthless, someone who made his own rules. He wasn't pretending to be anything else, wasn't hiding his true nature behind practiced charm and empty promises. "No," Lena said, and meant it. "No second thoughts." "Good." Adrian nodded to his driver, and the car pulled smoothly away from the curb. "Because we have a lot of work to do, Mrs. Moretti." Mrs. Moretti. The name settled over Lena like a coat of armor. As they drove away from the Cathedral of St. Catherine, Lena caught one last glimpse of the building in the side mirror, the Gothic spires, the stone steps, the scene of her very public destruction. She didn't feel sad, watching it disappear behind them. She felt free. The attorney's office was in a building that made the Wellington firm look modest, all steel and glass and the kind of modern architecture that screamed money without having to whisper about it. Adrian's lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Victoria Chen, didn't even blink when they walked in with Lena still wearing her torn wedding dress. "Mr. Moretti," she said coolly, "I had a feeling I'd be seeing you today." "Victoria, this is Lena Carter, soon to be Lena Moretti." Adrian guided Lena to a leather chair in front of Victoria's massive desk. "We need a contract. Marriage or business?" "Both." Victoria's eyebrows rose fractionally, the most emotion Lena had seen from her. "I see. And does Ms. Carter have representation?" "Not yet," Lena admitted, but Adrian said, "That I'd pay for it," Adrian interrupted smoothly. "Victoria, recommend someone. Someone good who won't try to take advantage of Lena's current emotional state." "I'm not in an emotional state," Lena protested, aware of how completely ridiculous that sounded given that she was still wearing the dress from her aborted wedding. Victoria's mouth twitched in what might have been amusement. "Of course not. I'll call Sarah Brennan. She specializes in marriage contracts and doesn't intimidate easily." She paused, her gaze sharp on Adrian. "She also won't let you slip anything past her client." "Good," Adrian said simply. "That's why I'm asking you to recommend her." Within an hour, Sarah Brennan arrived. A woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair and eyes that could probably cut through steel. She took one look at Lena and said, "Are you being coerced?" "No," Lena said. "Threatened?" "No." "Promise things that sound too good to be true." Lena hesitated. Sarah pounced on the pause. "What did he promise you?" "Law school tuition, a settlement after 1 year, my own space." Lena met Sarah's eyes directly. "Revenge." Sarah's expression didn't change. "At least he's honest about it. Victoria, let's see what your client is proposing." The contract took hours to draft. Sarah fought for every clause, pushing back on anything that gave Adrian too much control or Lena too little protection. To Lena's surprise, Adrian rarely argued. When Sarah demanded that Lena receive $50,000 a month as a household allowance, with no requirement to account for how she spent it, Adrian just nodded. When she insisted on a clause that allowed Lena to end the marriage immediately if Adrian became physically threatening, he signed without hesitation. "You're being very agreeable," Victoria observed at one point. "Because Ms. Brennan is protecting my interests as much as Lena's," Adrian replied. "I need Lena to feel secure in this arrangement. If she's constantly worried about hidden clauses or betrayal, she won't be convincing as my wife." "How mercenary of you," Sarah said dryly. "I told Lena I was pragmatic." Adrian glanced at Lena, something unreadable in his dark eyes. "I meant it." By the time they finished, it was nearly 7 in the evening. The contract ran to 43 pages of dense legal language, but Sarah walked Lena through every section, making sure she understood exactly what she was agreeing to. 1 year of marriage, public appearances as required, separate bedrooms, no requirement for physical intimacy, a settlement of $2 million at the end of the year, with an additional $500,000 for every year beyond that if they chose to extend the arrangement. Law school tuition paid in full, a monthly allowance that made Lena's head spin, access to Adrian's homes, cars, and resources, her own security team if she wanted it. In exchange, Lena would present herself as Adrian's devoted wife, attend events, smile for cameras, allow the world to believe that Marcus Wellington's rejection had driven her straight into Adrian Moretti's arms. "It's a good contract," Sarah said finally. "Better than I expected, honestly, but Lena, you need to understand what you're getting into. Adrian Moretti has a reputation." "For what?" Lena asked. Sarah and Victoria exchanged glances. Victoria spoke first. "He's not violent, if that's what you're worried about, but he's intense. He doesn't do anything halfway, and once he decides something is his to protect, he's absolutely ruthless about it." "I can hear you," Adrian said mildly from where he stood by the window, looking out at the city lights below. "You're supposed to," Victoria replied. "I'm making sure your future wife knows exactly what she's signing up for." Adrian turned from the window, his expression serious. "Lena, they're right. I'm not a good man in the conventional sense. I've built my business by being smarter, faster, and more willing to take risks than my competitors. I've made enemies, some of them dangerous." He crossed the office to stand in front of her. "If you sign this contract, you become part of my world. That means protection, yes, but it also means inheriting my conflicts." "Will I be in danger?" Lena asked bluntly. "Not if I can prevent it, and I have significant resources devoted to prevention." Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. "But I won't lie to you. My life isn't safe in the way Marcus Wellington's country club existence is safe." Lena thought about safety, about the safe choice she'd made 3 years ago when she'd fallen for Marcus's charm, about the safe future she'd been building, where she'd trade authenticity for acceptance and independence for approval, about how that safety had shattered the moment Marcus had announced she was beneath his standards. "I'll sign it," Lena said. Sarah pulled out a pen. "Read it one more time. All 43 pages. I'll wait." So Lena read. Every word, every clause, every provision that Sarah had fought to include. When she finally set down the last page, her hands were steady. She signed her name, Lena Carter, soon to be legally changed to Lena Moretti, in 12 different places. Adrian signed beside her each time, his signature a bold slash of ink. "Congratulations," Victoria said dryly. "You're now contractually obligated to pretend to be in love." "How romantic," Sarah added with equal dryness. Adrian ignored them both. He was looking at Lena with an expression she couldn't quite read. "We should get you out of that dress. My home is 20 minutes from here. I don't have any other clothes, Lena realized suddenly. Everything she owned was in the apartment she now had 30 days to vacate. The apartment Marcus would probably change the locks on within the week. We'll handle it tomorrow, Adrian said. Tonight you can borrow something of mine. The idea of wearing Adrian Moretti's clothes should have felt strange. Instead, it felt like exactly the kind of surreal detail that made sense in a day that had already completely departed from reality. The car was waiting outside. Lena climbed in, Adrian's suit jacket still draped around her shoulders, the contract safely tucked into Sarah's briefcase along with a copy for Lena's records. As they drove through the city, Lena watched the lights blur past the window. Somewhere out there, Marcus was probably at his parents' estate, being congratulated on his narrow escape from an unsuitable marriage. His mother was probably already planning his redemption tour, a carefully orchestrated return to society that would paint him as the victim of his own kind heart. And Lena? Lena was driving toward a stranger's home, wearing a torn wedding dress and a contract marriage, having traded one uncertain future for another in the span of a few hours. Regrets? Adrian asked quietly. Lena turned from the window to look at him. In the car's dim interior, his features were all shadows and sharp angles. He looked exactly like what he was, someone dangerous who'd offered her a devil's bargain. Ask me again in a year, Lena said. Adrian's mouth curved into that almost smile. Fair enough. The car pulled through a gate into a private driveway, then up to a house that wasn't a house at all. It was a compound of glass and steel and architectural ambition perched on a hillside with views of the entire city spread out below like a constellation. Welcome home, Mrs. Moretti, Adrian said as the driver opened her door. Lena stepped out into her new life, the autumn wind catching her torn dress and sending it billowing around her like a flag. Somewhere in the city below, people were already talking, already spreading the news that Marcus Wellington's jilted bride had been seen getting into Adrian Moretti's car, already speculating about what it meant. Let them talk, Lena thought. She had nothing left to lose and everything to gain, and if that made her dangerous too, well, maybe it was time the girl from nowhere learned how to bite back. The interior of Adrian's home matched its exterior, all clean lines and expensive minimalism, the kind of space that felt more like a museum than somewhere people actually lived. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city lights like living artwork. The furniture was Italian leather and polished chrome, positioned with the precision of someone who valued aesthetics over comfort. Lena stood in the massive foyer, suddenly aware of how out of place she looked in her torn wedding dress, her makeup smeared from crying, her hair falling out of its carefully constructed updo. The master suite is upstairs, Adrian said, gesturing toward a floating staircase that seemed to defy physics. But I thought you might prefer one of the guest rooms for tonight. More privacy while you adjust. Thank you, Lena managed, though the formality of the conversation felt surreal. They'd just signed a contract binding their lives together for a year, and here they were discussing sleeping arrangements like polite strangers, which, she supposed, they were. A woman emerged from what Lena assumed was the kitchen, 50s, gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, wearing a crisp black dress and sensible shoes. Her expression was neutral, but not unkind as she took in Lena's appearance. This is Elena, Adrian said. She manages the household. Elena, this is my wife, Lena. The word still felt foreign. Wife. Lena Carter had never become Lena Wellington, but somehow in the span of a few hours, she'd become Lena Moretti. Mrs. Moretti, Elena said with a slight nod. Welcome. I prepared the blue guest suite. Shall I show you up? Actually, Adrian interrupted. Give us a moment. Then, yes, please help Lena get settled. He turned to Lena. We need to discuss tomorrow. Tomorrow. Right. Because apparently catastrophic life changes came with scheduling requirements. Adrian led her to a living room that probably cost more than most people's houses, gesturing for her to sit on a sofa that was beautiful and deeply uncomfortable. He remained standing, his hands in his pockets, backlit by the city lights behind him. The marriage license will be expedited, he said. We'll make it legal within 48 hours. But the world doesn't know that timeline yet. As far as anyone's concerned, we could be planning a wedding or we could have already eloped. I want to control that narrative. How? Lena asked, struggling to focus through her exhaustion. By being seen together, Tomorrow morning, we'll have breakfast at Marcello's. It's a restaurant where society types gather. Word will spread before we even order coffee. His mouth curved slightly. Then shopping. You need clothes, and I want witnesses to see me buying them for you. The idea of Adrienne Moretti buying her clothes felt uncomfortably close to something transactional, something that proved every terrible thing people would say about her. But then, wasn't this entire arrangement transactional? She'd signed a contract. She was being paid for her participation. What kind of clothes? She asked. The kind that make a statement. Adrienne's dark eyes assessed her with an intensity that made her shift on the uncomfortable sofa. You're not Marcus Wellington's discarded almost wife anymore. You're my partner. That means dressing the part. I don't know what that part looks like. No, but you'll learn. It wasn't a criticism, just a statement of fact. I'll have a stylist meet us. Her name is Isabella, and she's excellent at translating personality into wardrobe. Trust her. Trust. Such a simple word for such a complicated concept. Lena didn't trust Adrienne Moretti. She barely knew him. But she'd signed his contract, accepted his offer, and climbed into his car. She was already trusting him with significantly more than her wardrobe. Okay, she said quietly. Adrienne studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. You're exhausted. We can discuss the details tomorrow. Wait. Lena stopped him before he could call for Elena. I need to know something. Ask. Why me? Really? She gestured at herself, at the torn dress and ruined makeup. You said you needed someone who wanted revenge, but there must be dozens of people who hate the Wellingtons. Why choose the girl who got humiliated at the altar? Adrienne was quiet for so long that Lena thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, more careful. Because you survived, he said simply. You were destroyed in front of 200 people, filmed and mocked and reduced to entertainment. And instead of disappearing, you got up off those cathedral steps and took my hand. He tilted his head slightly. That takes a particular kind of strength, the kind I need beside me. I didn't feel strong. I felt desperate. Desperation and strength aren't mutually exclusive. Adrienne moved toward the stairs, then paused. Get some rest, Lena. Tomorrow we start rebuilding you into someone they can't destroy. He disappeared up the floating staircase, leaving Lena alone with Elena, who appeared as if summoned by some invisible signal. Come, Mrs. Moretti, the older woman said gently. Let's get you out of that dress. The blue guest suite was larger than the entire apartment Lena had shared with Marcus. The bed alone could have slept 4 people comfortably. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered the same dramatic city views as the living room, the lights twinkling like earthbound stars. Elena helped Lena out of the wedding dress with practiced efficiency, neither commenting on the tear in the hem nor the significance of removing a wedding dress that had never served its purpose. She produced a silk pajama set in deep navy, clearly expensive, clearly not meant for Lena originally, but soft against her skin after the structured constraint of the wedding gown. Mr. Moretti asked me to provide whatever you might need, Elena said, gathering the discarded dress. There are toiletries in the bathroom, towels in the warming drawer. If you're hungry— I'm not, Lena interrupted, then softened her tone. Thank you, Elena. I'm just tired. Elena's expression remained neutral, but something in her eyes suggested understanding. Of course. I'll be downstairs if you need anything. The house phone is on the nightstand. Just dial 0 to reach me. After Elena left, Lena stood alone in the enormous bedroom, feeling untethered from reality. This morning, she'd woken up in Marcus's apartment, nervous but certain about her future. Tonight she was in a stranger's home, contractually married to a man she'd met hours ago. Her entire life pivoted in a direction she couldn't have imagined. She moved to the windows, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. Somewhere out there was the cathedral where she'd been destroyed. The apartment she'd have to pack up. The life she'd tried so hard to build now collapsed into rubble. Lena's phone buzzed in the small clutch she'd carried to the wedding. She'd forgotten she even had it. 14 missed calls from Marcus, 23 text messages. She opened them despite knowing better. Marcus. Lena, we need to talk. Please answer. Marcus. This is ridiculous. You're being dramatic. Marcus. My mother saw you get into Adrienne Moretti's car. What are you thinking? Marcus. Moretti is dangerous. He's not like us. You need to come back. Marcus. Lena. Answer your phone. The messages continued in that vein, demands disguised as concern, criticism framed as care. The same pattern that had defined their entire relationship, now stripped of its charming veneer. Lena deleted them all without responding. There was also a message from a number she didn't recognize. This is Sarah Brennan. I wanted to make sure you arrived safely and that Mr. Moretti has honored the terms of your agreement. Call me if you need anything, day or night. The unexpected kindness made Lena's throat tight. She typed back a quick reply confirming she was fine, then plugged her phone into charge and climbed into the massive bed. Sleep should have been impossible. Instead, exhaustion pulled her under within minutes, dragging her into dreams where she stood at the cathedral altar over and over, watching Marcus destroy her in an endless loop. She woke to sunlight streaming through windows she'd forgotten to cover and the smell of coffee drifting up from downstairs. For a moment, Lena couldn't remember where she was. Then memory crashed back. The wedding, the humiliation, Adrian Moretti's impossible offer. Her phone showed 8 a.m. and 3 new messages, all from Marcus. She deleted them without reading. Someone had left clothes on the chair by the door, designer jeans that looked like they'd fit perfectly, a silk blouse in deep emerald, and a note in elegant handwriting. For breakfast, Isabella will have more options this afternoon. The clothes fit like they'd been made for her. Either Adrian was exceptionally good at estimating sizes, or Elena had some kind of supernatural measuring ability. Lena found her way downstairs following the coffee smell, discovering Adrian in the kitchen reading something on his phone while drinking espresso from a tiny cup. He'd changed from yesterday's suit into dark jeans and a black sweater that probably cost more than her former monthly rent. The casual clothing should have made him seem more approachable. It didn't. "Good morning," he said without looking up from his phone. "Elena made breakfast. We leave in 20 minutes. "Good morning to you too," Lena replied, pouring herself coffee from the French press on the counter. "What's the plan?" "Breakfast at Marcello's, as discussed, then shopping with Isabella." Adrian finally set his phone down, his dark eyes assessing her. "The clothes suit you." "They're beautiful, thank you." "Don't thank me yet. You'll be photographed everywhere we go today. Make sure that's something you can handle." Lena thought about the cameras yesterday, capturing her humiliation for posterity and social media. The idea of more cameras, more scrutiny, made her stomach clench, but running from it wouldn't change anything. "I can handle it," she said with more confidence than she felt. Adrian's mouth curved slightly. "Good, because we're about to make your ex-fiancé's morning very unpleasant." Marcello's occupied a corner location in the city's most expensive district, its outdoor seating area already half full despite the autumn chill. Adrian's Mercedes pulled up directly in front, the valet rushing to open doors before the car had fully stopped. "Showtime," Adrian murmured, then rounded the car to open Lena's door himself, offering his hand with practiced gallantry. The moment Lena stepped onto the sidewalk, she felt the stares. A woman at a nearby table choked on her mimosa. A man in an expensive suit dropped his newspaper. Conversations died mid-sentence as every head turned to watch Adrian Moretti guide his companion, Marcus Wellington's jilted bride, still news less than 24 hours after her cathedral humiliation, toward a prime outdoor table. "Mr. Moretti," the host stammered, nearly tripping over himself. "We weren't expecting... we don't have your usual table available." "This one's fine," Adrian said smoothly, pulling out a chair for Lena at a table positioned perfectly for maximum visibility. "We won't be here long." As Lena sat, she caught fragments of whispered conversations from nearby tables. "That's her, the one from yesterday." "Wellington must be losing his mind. Moved fast, didn't she?" Adrian settled across from her, completely unbothered by the attention. "Coffee?" he asked, loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "Or would you prefer champagne? We could be celebrating." "Coffee's fine," Lena managed, her hands shaking slightly as she reached for the menu. "Relax," Adrian said quietly, his voice pitched for her ears only. "You're not the rejected bride anymore. You're the woman who landed Adrian Moretti. Let them wonder how you did it." A waiter appeared with coffee and water, his professional mask barely concealing his curiosity. "Mr. Moretti, it's good to see you. And your companion?" "My wife," Adrian corrected smoothly. "Lena Moretti." The waiter's eyes widened fractionally. At the next table, someone's phone appeared, camera pointed in their direction. "Congratulations," the waiter said weakly. I'll give you a moment with the menus." The moment he left, Adrian leaned back in his chair with the satisfied expression of someone who'd just won a chess match. "That'll be online within 10 minutes. Hashtag trending within the hour." "You planned this," Lena realized. "Of course I planned this. Marcello's on a Saturday morning is society's information exchange. By noon, everyone who matters will know you're no longer available." "Because I'm yours." Adrian's expression shifted slightly. "Because you chose to be. There's a difference." Before Lena could respond, a woman approached their table, 60-ish, dripping in Cartier, with the kind of surgically maintained face that suggested significant financial investment in appearing ageless. "Adrian, darling," she purred, completely ignoring Lena. "I heard the most ridiculous rumor that you'd gotten married." "Not a rumor, Patricia." Adrian gestured to Lena. "Lena, this is Patricia Hammond. She runs the charity circuit and knows everything worth knowing about everyone worth knowing. Patricia, my wife, Lena." Patricia's Botoxed face couldn't quite manage the full range of shocked expressions, but her eyes widened. "Your wife? How sudden?" "When you know, Adrian said with a slight shrug. "Isn't that what people say?" Patricia's gaze finally landed on Lena, assessing her with the cold precision of an auctioneer evaluating inventory. Didn't I see you somewhere recently?" "The Cathedral of St. Catherine," Lena said evenly, deciding to control the narrative before Patricia could. "Yesterday, my wedding that didn't happen." The admission sent a visible ripple through Patricia's composure. Oh my. That was you. And now you're with someone who actually wants to marry her," Adrian finished smoothly. "Funny how things work out." Patricia recovered quickly, her social training kicking in. "Well, this is quite the development. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of you both." She air-kissed near Adrian's cheeks, nowhere near actually making contact, and retreated to her own table, already pulling out her phone. "She'll call everyone she knows before we finish breakfast," Adrian observed, "including the Wellingtons. Is that what you want?" "It's what we both want, whether you've admitted it yet or not." Adrian caught the waiter's attention. "We'll have the usual for me and for my wife." He looked at Lena expectantly. She ordered without really thinking about it, still processing the bizarre theater they were performing. When the waiter left, she leaned forward, keeping her voice low. "This feels manipulative." "It is manipulative," Adrian agreed. "I'm manipulating public perception to make us appear legitimate, while simultaneously putting pressure on the Wellingtons. That's the entire point. And what am I doing? Getting revenge while pretending you're not." His dark eyes held hers. "Tell me honestly, does it bother you that Marcus is probably hearing about this right now? That his mother is calling him in a panic? That everyone who watched you get humiliated yesterday now has to reconcile that image with you sitting here as my wife?" It should have bothered her. Lena had never considered herself vindictive. But the satisfaction that curled through her chest at the thought of Marcus's reaction felt warm and sweet and completely justified. "No," she admitted quietly. "It doesn't bother me at all." Adrian's smile was sharp and approving. "Good. Then eat your breakfast and let me worry about the performance." The food arrived, eggs Benedict for Adrian, avocado toast for Lena, and they ate while conversation swirled around them, everyone pretending not to stare while absolutely staring. Lena forced herself to take small bites, to sip her coffee calmly, to act like this was all completely normal instead of the most surreal morning of her life. Halfway through breakfast, Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his expression turned predatory. "What?" Lena asked. "Text from Marcus Wellington." Adrian turned the phone so Lena could see the message. "We need to talk about Lena. Name your price." "He thinks he can buy me back," Lena said, surprised by how hollow the words made her feel. Yesterday she would have done anything to hear Marcus say he'd made a mistake. Today, it just felt pathetic. "He thinks everything has a price," Adrian corrected. "People like the Wellingtons always do. They can't comprehend that some things aren't for sale." "But I am for sale," Lena pointed out. "That's what our contract is." "No. You agreed to a business arrangement with clear terms and mutual benefit. That's employment, not ownership." Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. The Wellingtons think they can purchase people's loyalty, affection, and silence. They're about to learn otherwise. He typed a response, then showed it to Lena before sending, "Ms. Carter is unavailable. Perhaps you should have considered her value before publicly destroying her." "That'll make him angry," Lena said. "I'm counting on it. Angry men make mistakes." Adrian hit send, then pocketed his phone. "Finish your breakfast. We have shopping to do." Isabella turned out to be a tiny Italian woman in her 40s with an eye for fashion that bordered on supernatural. She met them at a boutique so exclusive it didn't have a name on the door, just a discreet brass plate with an appointment-only policy. "Adrian Caro," she said, kissing his cheeks with actual contact, unlike Patricia's air kisses. "This must be your bride. Let me look at you." She circled Lena like a predator, assessing from every angle. "Good bones. Excellent posture, terrible clothes. No offense. Adrian gave you those, yes? Men never understand proportion." She clapped her hands together. "We fix this. You, come. Adrian, you wait here. Men have no place in transformation." Before Lena could protest, Isabella had whisked her into a private fitting room roughly the size of her old apartment. Racks of clothing lined the walls, designer labels Lena recognized from fashion magazines and many she didn't. "Isabella," Lena started. "I don't know what Adrian told you, but I can't afford—" "Adrian is paying. You are not to worry about cost. You are to worry about presentation." Isabella was already pulling items from racks with decisive efficiency. "You were engaged to a Wellington, yes? I know this because everyone knows this as of yesterday. So you dress like Wellington wife, boring, safe, trying not to outshine. This is finished now." She held up a dress in deep crimson, something that would have made Marcus's mother clutch her pearls. "Now you dress like Moretti wife, confident, powerful, someone who does not apologize for taking up space." Over the next 2 hours, Isabella transformed Lena's wardrobe, tailored suits in jewel tones, dresses that flattered without being conservative, evening gowns that made Lena look like she belonged at galas instead of serving them, casual wear that was somehow still elegant, shoes, bags, jewelry, all of it coordinated with the precision of a military campaign. "This is too much," Lena protested as Isabella added a 6th evening gown to the pile. "This is minimum," Isabella corrected. "You appear with Adrian, you are photographed. You cannot wear same dress twice in same month. People notice, people judge. We build you wardrobe that makes people talk for right reasons." Through the fitting room curtain, Lena could hear Adrian's voice on a phone call, his tone cold and clipped in a way that made her glad she wasn't on the receiving end. "Who's he talking to?" she asked Isabella. "Business. Adrian is always working." Isabella adjusted the fit of a black cocktail dress, pinning it for alterations. "He is a good man, though. Intense, yes. Dangerous, certainly. But good to people he protects." "How long have you known him?" 15 years, since he first came to this city with nothing but ambition and excellent taste. Isabella smiled slightly. "He has changed much. Become harder, maybe, but still good underneath." Lena wanted to ask more, but Isabella was already pulling another dress over her head, critiquing the fit with rapid-fire Italian mixed with English. When they finally emerged from the fitting room, Adrian was off his phone and examining something on his tablet. He looked up as Isabella presented Lena, who was wearing a charcoal suit that somehow made her feel powerful and feminine simultaneously. "Better," he said simply. "Better?" Isabella looked offended. "She is magnificent. I have created art." "You have," Adrian agreed, his eyes on Lena with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "How much do we owe you?" "I send the bill. You pay it. This is how we always work." Isabella kissed his cheeks again. "Alterations will be ready in 3 days. I send everything to your home, yes?" "Yes." "Thank you, Isabella." After Isabella left to handle the practical details, Adrian stood and approached Lena, circling her the same way Isabella had, but with different intent. His assessment felt less about clothes and more about presentation, about the image they would project together. "You look like you belong," he said finally. "Belong where?" "Anywhere you want to." He gestured to the door. "Ready for the next step?" "Which is?" "Making this marriage legal." The courthouse was significantly less romantic than the cathedral had been, all fluorescent lighting and bureaucratic efficiency. But the marriage license was real, signed by both of them and witnessed by Adrian's attorney, Victoria, and her assistant. "You're now legally married," the clerk announced with all the enthusiasm of someone processing parking tickets. "Congratulations, Mrs. Lena Moretti." It was official now, stamped and filed and completely binding for the next year. They emerged from the courthouse to find a small crowd of photographers waiting. Someone had tipped them off, though Lena suspected Adrian had orchestrated that too. Cameras flashed as Adrian guided her to the Mercedes, his hand protective on her lower back. "Mr. Moretti, is it true you married Marcus Wellington's ex-fiancée? When's the wedding?" "Lena, how do you respond to allegations that this is a revenge scheme?" Adrian ignored them all, but as they reached the car, he turned and pulled Lena close, his hand cupping her face with surprising gentleness. For a moment, she thought he might actually kiss her. Instead, he leaned his forehead against hers, the gesture intimate enough to send the photographers into a frenzy. "Let them have their photo," he murmured against her ear. "Give them something to believe in." Then he helped her into the car, and they were gone, leaving the photographers and their questions behind. "You're very good at this," Lena observed as they drove back toward his home. "At what?" "Performance. Making people see what you want them to see. It's a useful skill in my line of work." Adrian was quiet for a moment. "But with you, it's easier. You're a natural performer yourself. You wouldn't have survived 3 years with the Wellingtons otherwise." "That was different. That was trying to fit in." "No, that was becoming whoever they needed you to be so they'd accept you. Same skill, different application." He glanced at her. "The difference now is you get to choose who you become." Back at the house, Elena had prepared dinner, something elaborate that Lena was too exhausted to fully appreciate. She pushed food around her plate while Adrian reviewed documents on his tablet, the comfortable silence between them punctuated only by the clink of silverware. "Your phone's been buzzing all evening," Adrian observed without looking up from his work. Lena glanced at her phone and saw 17 new messages, all from Marcus or numbers she didn't recognize. "Probably journalists," she said. "Probably. You'll want to change your number. I'll have it arranged tomorrow." He set down his tablet. "How are you holding up?" The question surprised her with its directness. "I'm not sure. This all feels surreal?" "Insane," Lena corrected. "Yesterday I was supposed to become Mrs. Wellington. Today I'm actually Mrs. Moretti. Tomorrow I'm going shopping for a wardrobe that costs more than I used to make in a year. None of this feels real." "It's real," Adrian said quietly. "The question is whether you can handle it being real." "I signed your contract. I don't have much choice." "You always have a choice, Lena. That's the entire point of our arrangement, giving you choices you didn't have before." He stood, gathering his dishes. "Get some rest. Monday we start making public appearances as a couple. I need you ready for that." Lena watched him disappear into the kitchen, then headed upstairs to the blue guest suite that was starting to feel less foreign. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Marcus. This time she opened it. "Marcus, whatever he's paying you, I'll double it, triple it. Just come back. We can fix this." The audacity of it, the assumption that money could repair what he'd destroyed, made Lena laugh out loud. A slightly hysterical sound, but genuine. She typed a response for the first time since yesterday. "I'm not for sale, Marcus. I never was. That was your mistake." Then she blocked his number, changed her settings to refuse calls from unknown numbers, and climbed into bed. Through the windows, the city lights twinkled in the darkness. Somewhere out there, Marcus was probably panicking. His mother was probably strategizing. The society crowd was probably dissecting every photograph from today, analyzing Lena's transformation from rejected bride to Adrian Moretti's wife. Let them analyze, Lena thought. Let them talk and speculate and judge. She was done caring what people like that thought of her. For the first time in 3 years, Lena fell asleep without worrying about whether she was good enough. She was done trying to be enough for the wrong people. Now she just had to figure out who she wanted to be for herself. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Lena woke to find another note from Adrian slipped under her door, his handwriting as precise as everything else about him. Breakfast at 8. We have an event tonight. Dress accordingly. The event turned out to be a political fundraiser at the Ashford Estate, one of those sprawling mansions on the city's north side where old money gathered to congratulate itself on its charitable nature while drinking champagne that cost more per bottle than most people's monthly rent. Adrian explained this over breakfast with the casual disdain of someone who'd spent years navigating such circles without ever quite belonging to them. "The Wellingtons will be there," he said, watching Lena's face for her reaction. "Marcus, his parents, probably half the people who attended your almost wedding. That's why we're going." Lena's coffee suddenly tasted bitter. "You want to parade me in front of them?" "I want them to see what they lost. There's a difference." Adrian set down his espresso cup with precise care. "If you're not ready, I'm ready." The words came out stronger than Lena felt, but she refused to back down now. She'd spent the weekend adjusting to her new reality, exploring Adrian's house like a museum she was allowed to live in, trying on pieces of her new wardrobe and barely recognizing herself in the mirror. The woman reflected back at her looked confident, expensive, completely transformed from the girl who'd served coffee in a diner 4 years ago. But looking the part and being the part were different things entirely. "Isabella is sending over a selection of gowns this afternoon," Adrian continued. "Choose whichever makes you feel most powerful. We leave at 7. The rest of the day passed in a blur of preparation. Isabella arrived with 3 assistants and enough evening gowns to outfit a small pageant, each more stunning than the last. Lena tried on midnight blue silk, emerald green satin, classic black with architectural shoulders. But it was the final dress that made Isabella clap her hands together in satisfaction. Deep burgundy that looked almost black in certain light, with a neckline that plunged just enough to be daring without crossing into scandalous. The fabric hugged Lena's curves before flowing into a dramatic train, the kind of dress that commanded attention simply by existing. When Lena looked at the mirror, she saw someone who could walk into a room full of people who'd watched her humiliation and make them regret ever underestimating her. "This one," Isabella declared. "This is the dress of a woman who has already won." A stylist arrived to handle hair and makeup, transforming Lena's appearance with the same precision Isabella had applied to her wardrobe. Smoky eyes that made her look mysterious rather than soft. Hair swept up in an elegant twist that exposed the column of her neck. Jewelry that Adrian had provided without comment. Diamond earrings that probably cost more than a car, and a simple platinum bracelet that was somehow more devastating than anything ornate could have been. When Lena descended the floating staircase at 6:45, she found Adrian waiting in the foyer wearing a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. He looked up as she approached, and something flickered across his expression too quickly for her to interpret. "You'll do," he said, his tone deliberately casual. "Just, I'll do?" Lena felt a flash of annoyance. She'd just spent 4 hours being transformed into someone who barely resembled herself, and Adrian's response was the verbal equivalent of a shrug. His mouth curved slightly. "If I told you how stunning you actually look, you might think I was developing feelings beyond our contract. Can't have that." The comment should have been reassuring, a reminder that this was all performance, all strategy. Instead, it landed strangely in Lena's chest, a sensation she refused to examine too closely. "Heaven forbid," she said lightly, accepting the wrap he offered her. "Shall we go ruin Marcus's evening?" "That's the spirit." The Ashford estate was exactly as pretentious as Lena had imagined. All columned porticos and manicured gardens, with valets in crisp uniforms and guests arriving in vehicles that cost more than most people's homes. Adrian's Mercedes pulled up to the entrance behind a Bentley, and in front of what Lena was pretty sure was a Rolls-Royce. "Remember," Adrian said quietly as they waited for their door to be opened, "you're not the girl who needed their approval anymore. You're my wife. That makes you untouchable." Untouchable. The words settled over Lena like armor as the valet opened her door and Adrian emerged from his side, rounding the car to offer his hand. The moment she stood, she felt eyes tracking their movement. Whispers started before they even reached the entrance. "Is that Adrian Moretti? I heard he got married." "The Wellington girl. Can you believe—" Adrian ignored it all, his hand settling possessively at the small of Lena's back as they entered the estate. The foyer alone was larger than most houses, all marble floors and crystal chandeliers, and the kind of ostentatious wealth that wanted everyone to know exactly how expensive it was. A woman in her 70s wearing enough diamonds to fund a small country approached with the predatory grace of a society matriarch sensing fresh gossip. "Adrian Moretti, how unexpected to see you at a political fundraiser. I thought you preferred to buy influence more directly." "Mrs. Ashford." Adrian's smile was polite and completely devoid of warmth. May I introduce my wife, Lena Moretti. Lena, this is Catherine Ashford. She's hosting tonight's performance of Charitable Generosity. Catherine's eyes went sharp as surgical steel as they landed on Lena. Your wife. How very sudden. I don't believe I received a wedding invitation. We kept it intimate, Adrian said smoothly. You understand? I understand many things. Catherine's gaze raked over Lena with the subtlety of a tax audit. Including that you were supposed to marry Marcus Wellington just days ago, weren't you, dear? The dear carried the same acid Lena remembered from Margaret Wellington's voice. But Lena had spent 3 years learning to smile through condescension. She deployed that smile now, adding just enough steel to make it interesting. Plans change, Mrs. Ashford, sometimes for the better. Clearly, Catherine's tone suggested she thought nothing about this situation was better, but social convention prevented her from saying so directly. Well, I'm sure you'll find tonight's crowd very familiar. Most of them attended your previous event. How convenient, Lena said sweetly. I won't have to explain who I am. Catherine's expression suggested she'd just been mildly poisoned, but was too polite to mention it. She excused herself with the practiced grace of someone beating a strategic retreat, leaving Adrian and Lena alone in the foyer's oppressive grandeur. Well handled, Adrian murmured, guiding her toward the ballroom where the main event was taking place. You're learning. I had good teachers. The Wellingtons taught me plenty about passive aggression disguised as politeness. The ballroom was a monument to excess. Gilded everything, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking gardens lit with thousands of fairy lights, and enough floral arrangements to denude a small forest. But it was the people that made Lena's breath catch. Hundreds of them, the same society crowd that had filled the cathedral days ago to watch her get destroyed. And there, near the bar, stood Marcus Wellington. He saw her at exactly the same moment she saw him. The glass of scotch he'd been raising to his lips froze halfway, his expression cycling through shock, disbelief, and something that might have been regret before settling on badly concealed anger. Steady, Adrian said quietly, his hand tightening fractionally at her back. Let him come to you. He will. Adrian was right. Marcus set down his drink and started across the ballroom with the determined stride of a man about to make a scene. His mother appeared from nowhere, her hand closing around his arm in a grip that looked casual but was clearly restraining. Margaret Wellington had perfected the art of looking simultaneously elegant and absolutely furious. She wore champagne silk that probably cost more than a car, her hair swept into a style that had required professional assistance, her jewelry understated in that way that screamed old money. When her eyes landed on Lena, the temperature in the immediate vicinity seemed to drop several degrees. Adrian, she said, her voice carrying the warmth of a glacier. How interesting to see you here. I wasn't aware you supported Senator Richardson's campaign. I don't, Adrian replied with brutal honesty. I'm here to make a point. By parading around with my son's former fiancé? Margaret's gaze finally acknowledged Lena's existence, though her expression suggested she was looking at something unpleasant she'd found on her shoe. How very mature of you both. Mother, Marcus said tightly, let me handle this. Handle what, exactly? Lena found her voice, surprised by how steady it sounded. There's nothing to handle, Marcus. You made your position very clear at the cathedral. I'm simply moving forward. By marrying him? Marcus gestured at Adrian like he was evidence in a criminal case. You know what he is, Lena, what he does, the people he associates with. I know he wanted to marry me, Lena said quietly. That already makes him better than you. The barb landed. Marcus flinched like she'd slapped him, and Margaret's expression turned absolutely venomous. Wanted to marry you, Margaret repeated, her voice dripping with disdain. Or wanted to use you to embarrass my family? Because let's be honest about what's happening here. You were a project, dear. Marcus was rebelling, playing at being democratically minded by dating someone so thoroughly beneath his station. But projects end. He realized his mistake before making it permanent. Actually, Adrian interrupted, his voice carrying an edge that made even Margaret pause. Marcus realized his mother still controls his trust fund and didn't want to risk his inheritance. Let's not pretend this was about Lena's inadequacies when it was really about your son's lack of spine. The words landed like grenades in the hushed space around them. Several nearby conversations stopped entirely, guests turning to watch the confrontation with barely concealed delight. Marcus's face flushed red. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" Adrian's smile was absolutely predatory. "Your family owes me $7 million from a development deal your father botched 3 years ago. I've been patient about collection, but my patience has limits. Perhaps it's time we discussed repayment terms." Margaret's composure cracked just slightly, a flash of genuine fear crossing her features before she locked it down. "That matter is being handled through proper legal channels." "The legal channels have been exhausted, Margaret. What's left is negotiation, or litigation." Adrian paused, letting the threat hang in the air. "But I'm feeling generous tonight. Let's call it even in exchange for something very simple." "Which is?" Margaret asked warily. "An apology, to my wife. For every condescending word, every dismissive glance, every moment you made her feel like she was beneath you." Adrian's hand moved from Lena's back to her waist, pulling her closer in a gesture that was clearly possessive. "Apologize like you mean it, and I'll consider your debt settled." The silence that followed was absolute. Every eye in the immediate vicinity was locked on Margaret Wellington, watching to see if the society matriarch would actually humble herself before the girl she'd spent 3 years treating like a servant. Margaret's expression went through several permutations before settling on cold calculation. She was weighing her options, measuring the cost of her pride against $7 million her family apparently couldn't afford to lose. "This is ridiculous," Marcus protested. "Mother, you can't actually—" "Be quiet, Marcus." Margaret's voice cut through her son's objection like a knife through tissue paper. She turned to Lena, every muscle in her face tight with barely controlled rage. "I apologize if my actions made you feel unwelcome." "That's not an apology," Adrian said flatly. "That's a conditional statement designed to avoid actual accountability. Try again." Margaret's hands clenched into fists at her sides, her perfectly manicured nails probably drawing blood from her palms. When she spoke again, each word sounded like it was being physically extracted from her throat. "I apologize for my treatment of you, Lena. It was inappropriate and unkind." The apology was about as sincere as a politician's campaign promise, but it was public and witnessed by dozens of people who had spread the story before the night ended. Lena saw what Adrian had done. He'd forced Margaret Wellington to publicly acknowledge her own cruelty, to humble herself before the very people whose opinions she valued most. It was perfect revenge wrapped in the appearance of magnanimity. "Thank you," Lena said quietly, and meant it. Adrian nodded once, the gesture of a man who'd gotten exactly what he wanted. "We're square then. Enjoy your evening, Margaret. Marcus." He guided Lena away from the Wellingtons before either could respond, his hand steady at her waist as they moved deeper into the ballroom. Behind them, Lena heard Margaret hiss something at Marcus in a tone that suggested the drive home would be extremely unpleasant. "That was—" Lena started, then stopped, searching for the right word. Cruel seemed too harsh. Satisfying seemed too mild. "Necessary," Adrian supplied. "They needed to understand that you're not someone they can destroy without consequences anymore." $7 million seems like significant consequences. "They should have thought of that before deciding you weren't worth basic human decency." Adrian snagged 2 glasses of champagne from a passing waiter, handing one to Lena. "To revenge served cold." Lena clinked her glass against his, the crystal ringing with a clear, pure note. "I thought you said this wasn't about revenge." "I lied. It's absolutely about revenge. The difference is we're being strategic about it." His dark eyes held hers over the rim of his champagne glass. "How does it feel?" "Strange," Lena admitted. "Good, but strange. Like I'm wearing someone else's life." "You're wearing the life you should have always had. One where people treat you with respect instead of contempt." Adrian's attention shifted to something over her shoulder. "We have company. Senator Richardson is approaching, and he'll want an introduction." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and carefully orchestrated conversations. Adrian guided Lena through the social landscape like a general maneuvering troops, positioning them in front of the right people at the right times, ensuring that everyone who mattered saw them together. Saw that Lena was no longer the rejected bride, but Adrian Moretti's wife, someone who commanded attention and respect simply by association. Every time Lena caught sight of Marcus across the ballroom, He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Regret, maybe. Or calculation. His mother kept him close, her hand frequently on his arm in what looked like restraint disguised as affection. Around 11, Lena excused herself to the restroom, needing a moment away from the performance. The ladies' room was as ostentatious as the rest of the estate, all marble and gold fixtures and individual lounging areas for touching up makeup. Lena was reapplying lipstick when the door opened and a woman she recognized from the cathedral entered. One of the bridesmaids, though Lena couldn't remember her name. Brittany? Bethany? One of those names that sounded expensive and came with a trust fund. Lana, the woman said, her tone somewhere between curious and catty. We haven't had a chance to talk. How are you handling all this? Handling what, exactly? The scrutiny, the gossip. Everyone knows this is just a revenge plot against Marcus. The woman, definitely Brittany, examined her own reflection in the mirror, adjusting hair that didn't need adjusting. I mean, we all understand. Adrian Moretti is very attractive and very rich, but he's also very dangerous. You do know what kind of business he's actually in, right? He's in real estate development, Lena said evenly. Brittany laughed, the sound sharp and unkind. Is that what he told you, Lena? Everyone knows Adrian Moretti has connections to, well, let's just say less than legitimate enterprises. Money laundering, probably. Maybe worse. If everyone knows, then I'm sure law enforcement knows too, Lena replied, keeping her voice calm despite the unease curling in her stomach. Has he been charged with anything? Well, no, but then I guess everyone is just spreading gossip without evidence. Lena capped her lipstick with decisive force. I thought you'd have learned by now that believing everything you hear leads to embarrassment. After all, everyone said Marcus and I were perfect together. Look how that turned out. Brittany's expression soured. I'm trying to help you, Lena. You're in over your head with a man you don't understand. Adrian Moretti isn't like us. No, Lena agreed. He's better. He doesn't pretend to care while stabbing people in the back. When Adrian destroys someone, at least he has the honesty to do it to their face. She left Brittany sputtering in the bathroom, but the conversation had planted seeds of doubt that grew as Lena made her way back to the ballroom. What did she actually know about Adrian Moretti beyond what he'd chosen to tell her? She'd signed a contract with a stranger, married him days after her own humiliation, and trusted that his intentions aligned with hers. But what if they didn't? Adrian was exactly where she'd left him, deep in conversation with a silver-haired man Lena recognized as a city councilman. When he saw her approaching, he excused himself smoothly and met her halfway across the ballroom. Everything all right? He asked, his dark eyes scanning her face with unsettling perceptiveness. You look like you've had an unpleasant conversation. Just Brittany being catty in the bathroom. Lena accepted his offered arm, letting him guide her toward the terrace where the crowd was thinner. She seemed very concerned about my well-being, given that I'm married to someone with alleged criminal connections. Adrian's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted, alleged being the operative word. So you're not going to deny it? I'm not going to dignify baseless gossip with a response. They reached the terrace, the cool night air a relief after the ballroom's oppressive warmth. But I will tell you this, I've built my business by being smarter and more ruthless than my competitors. That makes people uncomfortable. They invent explanations for my success that don't require them to admit they were outmaneuvered. That's not really an answer, Lena pointed out. No, it's not. Adrian turned to face her fully, his expression serious in the moonlight. I've done things that weren't entirely legal, Lena. Bribed city officials to fast-track permits, paid off inspectors to look the other way, used information I probably shouldn't have had access to. But I've never hurt anyone who didn't come at me first. And I've never profited from anything that actually harms people. The honesty was somehow more unsettling than a denial would have been. Why are you telling me this? Because you asked. Because you deserve to know what you've gotten yourself into. Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. If you want to end this arrangement, if you're having second thoughts, I'm not, Lena interrupted, surprised to find she meant it. I just needed to hear the truth from you, instead of from someone who's only interested in tearing me down. The truth is, I operate in moral gray areas that make conventional society uncomfortable. I always have. That's not going to change. His dark eyes searched hers. Can you live with that? Lena thought about the past 3 years of trying to fit into a world that had never wanted her, of smiling through cruelty and accepting criticism disguised as guidance, of believing that if she just followed all the rules, played by all the proper conventions, she'd eventually be accepted. The rules hadn't protected her. Convention hadn't saved her from public humiliation. Propriety hadn't stopped Marcus from destroying her in front of 200 witnesses. Adrian Moretti operated outside those rules, and somehow he'd done more to restore her dignity in 4 days than 3 years of proper behavior ever had. I can live with it, she said finally, as long as you're honest with me. Always, Adrian promised, and Lena believed him. They stayed on the terrace for a while longer, watching the party through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Inside, the guests continued their carefully choreographed dances of influence and gossip, everyone performing their assigned roles in society's elaborate theater. Marcus appeared at the ballroom's edge, his eyes finding Lena through the glass. Even from this distance, she could see the conflict in his expression, regret and anger, and something that might have been longing all tangled together. He's going to try to talk to you again, Adrian observed, following her gaze, probably without his mother present this time. Let him, Lena said. I'm not afraid of Marcus Wellington anymore. Good. Because fear is how people like the Wellingtons maintain control. The moment you stop being afraid of them, they lose all their power over you. As if summoned by their conversation, Marcus stepped onto the terrace, his expression determined. Adrian's posture shifted subtly, his body angling to put himself slightly between Lena and Marcus, protective without being obvious about it. I'd like to speak with Lena, Marcus said, his voice tight. Alone. No, Adrian replied simply. This doesn't concern you. Everything concerning my wife concerns me. Adrian's tone was pleasant, but there was steel underneath. Say whatever you need to say right here or don't say it at all. Marcus's jaw clenched, but he turned to Lena. This is insane. You know it is. We were going to build a life together, and now you're married to someone you barely know just to get back at me? I'm married to someone who wanted to marry me, Lena corrected. That's the difference you keep missing, Marcus. You didn't want me. You wanted your mother's approval more than you wanted me, and when she made you chose her. That's not fair. You don't understand the pressure. I understand perfectly. I understand that you're 31 years old and still terrified of disappointing your parents. I understand that you valued your inheritance more than our relationship. I understand that when it mattered most, you humiliated me in front of 200 people to prove your loyalty to your family. Lena's voice remained steady, even as emotion threatened to crack it. What I don't understand is why you're surprised that I moved on. Moved on? Marcus's laugh was bitter. You got married 4 days after our wedding was supposed to happen. That's not moving on, that's revenge. Call it whatever helps you sleep at night, Lena said. I call it recognizing my worth and refusing to settle for someone who didn't. He's using you, Marcus gestured at Adrian, to get at my family, to humiliate us, to give me a life where I'm not constantly trying to prove I deserve basic respect, Lena interrupted. If that's being used, I'll take it over what you were offering. Marcus flinched. For a moment, Lena saw genuine pain cross his features, and part of her, the part that had loved him for 3 years, felt an echo of sympathy. But it was distant now, muffled by everything that had happened between then and now. I made a mistake, Marcus said quietly. At the cathedral. I panicked, and I listened to my mother when I should have listened to my heart. Can we please just talk about this? Really talk without him hovering? No, Lena said gently. Because it doesn't matter anymore, Marcus. Even if Adrian disappeared tomorrow, even if this whole arrangement ended, I wouldn't go back to you. You showed me who you really are when the pressure was on, and I finally believe you. Lena. Go back inside, Marcus. Go find some society girl who'll make your mother happy and won't require you to actually defend her when it matters. That was never going to be me. Marcus stood frozen for a long moment, conflict warring across his features. Then, finally, he nodded once and turned away. His shoulders slumped in defeat as he disappeared back into the ballroom. Adrian waited until Marcus was gone before speaking. That was harder than you're pretending it was. Maybe, Lena admitted, but it was also necessary. I needed to say those things out loud. Needed to stop letting him think there was any scenario where we'd get back together. Is there? Adrian's question was casual, but Lena sensed genuine curiosity underneath. Any scenario where you'd go back to him? No, Lena said without hesitation. Even if our contract ended tomorrow, even if I had nothing, I wouldn't go back to trying to be someone I'm not just to earn someone else's approval. Adrian studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the moonlight. I think you might actually survive our arrangement with your sense of self intact. That's rarer than you'd think. What happens to most people who make deals with you? They lose themselves trying to become whoever they think I want them to be. His mouth curved slightly. But you're not most people, are you? Before Lena could respond, the doors to the terrace opened and Catherine Ashford emerged, her expression suggesting she'd been searching for them. There you are, she said, her tone suggesting they'd committed some social faux pas by being outside. We're about to do the speeches and the donation portion of the evening. Adrian, I trust you'll be appropriately generous? I'm always appropriately generous, Catherine. Adrian offered Lena his arm. Shall we go watch rich people congratulate themselves for their philanthropy? The rest of the evening passed in a blur of speeches and champagne and carefully orchestrated charity. Adrian donated an amount that made Lena's eyes water, $100,000 delivered with the casual indifference of someone tipping a waiter. The room erupted in polite applause, and Lena saw the Wellingtons' expressions darken from across the ballroom. They stayed until midnight, until Adrian had spoken to everyone who mattered and been photographed with all the right people. Until Lena's feet ached from her heels and her face hurt from maintaining her social smile. Finally, blessedly, they were back in the Mercedes, pulling away from the Ashford estate and its oppressive grandeur. You did well tonight, Adrian said as they drove through the dark streets. Better than well. You handled Margaret's apology with grace, Marcus's confrontation with strength, and society's scrutiny with the kind of confidence that takes most people years to develop. I had good motivation, Lena replied. 3 years of being treated like I wasn't good enough will do that. They were wrong, you know, about you not being good enough. Adrian's voice was quiet but firm. You were always too good for them. They just couldn't see it. The word settled warmly in Lena's chest, a counterweight to 3 years of subtle and not-so-subtle messages that she was somehow deficient. She turned to look at Adrian's profile in the dim light from passing street lamps, this man who'd offered her revenge wrapped in a business arrangement and somehow delivered something more valuable, the restoration of her own sense of worth. Thank you, she said quietly. For tonight. For all of it. Thank me when the year is over and you're free with enough money to build whatever life you want. Adrian glanced at her briefly. That's when you'll know if this was worth it. But sitting in the Mercedes wearing a dress that cost more than her old monthly rent, her feet aching from expensive heels and her heart lighter than it had been in years, Lena already knew. Whatever happened next, whoever she became in the process, she'd never again be the girl who accepted being treated as less than she was worth. And that alone made every moment of this surreal arrangement worthwhile. The weeks that followed the fundraiser settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal, though normal had been fundamentally redefined. Lena woke each morning in the blue guest suite, found notes from Adrian about their schedule, attended events where cameras captured their every interaction, and slowly learned to navigate the strange intersection of performance and reality that defined their arrangement. Law school applications became her anchor to something real beyond the theater of their public life. Adrian had kept his promise about tuition, depositing funds that covered not just school but living expenses for the next 3 years. Lena spent her mornings researching programs, drafting personal statements, and reminding herself that this arrangement had an expiration date and she needed something substantial waiting for her on the other side. But the line between performance and reality had started to blur in ways Lena hadn't anticipated. It happened in small moments. Adrian asking about her day over dinner and actually listening to her answers. The way he'd started keeping her preferred coffee in the house without her asking. How he'd learned to read her expressions well enough to know when she needed rescue from tedious conversations at events and when she wanted to handle things herself. 2 weeks after the Ashford fundraiser, Lena came downstairs to find Adrian in the kitchen with Elena, both of them looking at something on his tablet with unusual intensity. What's wrong? Lena asked, the tension in the room immediately obvious. Adrian looked up, his expression carefully neutral in that way that meant he was about to deliver bad news. The Wellingtons are filing a lawsuit. Against you? Against both of us. He turned the tablet so she could see the legal documents displayed on screen. They're claiming our marriage is a fraudulent scheme designed to damage their reputation and avoid legitimate debt collection. They want it annulled and they want damages. The words took a moment to penetrate. They can't do that. We have a legal marriage license. They can file whatever they want. Winning is a different matter. Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. This is Margaret's doing. She's trying to invalidate our marriage to prove you're still available for Marcus. That's insane. Marcus and I are over. You know that. I know that. But Margaret Wellington doesn't accept outcomes she hasn't orchestrated. Adrian set down the tablet with careful precision. Victoria's already working on our response. This will get messy before it gets resolved. Lena sank into a chair at the kitchen island, her mind racing through implications. What does this mean for our arrangement? It means we need to make our marriage even more convincing. If they're claiming fraud, we prove otherwise. Adrian's dark eyes met hers. That might require some adjustments to our current living situation. What kind of adjustments? The kind where we appear more like an actual married couple. Shared bedroom, public displays of affection, the appearance of genuine intimacy. He paused. I'm not asking you to actually share my bed, Lena, but we might need people to believe you do. The suggestion sent an unexpected flutter through Lena's stomach. Over the past weeks, she'd grown comfortable with Adrian's presence, had learned to read his moods and anticipate his needs the way he'd learned hers, but they'd maintained careful physical boundaries beyond what was necessary for cameras and public appearances. How do we make people believe that without actually changing anything? She asked. By being smarter about the performance. Your things moved into the master suite. References to our private life in conversations where it might come up. Maybe a carefully leaked detail or two through Elena, who everyone knows talks to other household staff. Adrian's expression remained neutral, but Lena caught something underneath. Tension, maybe, or calculation. Can you handle that level of pretense? Can you? Lena countered. His mouth curved slightly. I've been pretending various things for most of my life. This is just another role. But it didn't feel like just another role when Elena helped Lena move her belongings from the blue guest suite to the master bedroom later that day. The space was unmistakably Adrian's, all dark wood and masculine lines, with a bed large enough to sleep 6 people and windows that offered the same dramatic city views as the rest of the house. Mr. Moretti has taken one of the other guest rooms, Elena said quietly as she hung Lena's clothes in the massive closet that now held both their wardrobes in carefully separated sections. He said to tell you the arrangement is for appearances only. Your privacy will be respected. Thank you, Elena. Lena ran her hand over the silk duvet, feeling like an intruder in a space that wasn't meant for her. Has he seemed upset about any of this? The lawsuit? Having to adjust our arrangement? Elena considered the question with the careful deliberation of someone who'd spent years reading Adrian Moretti's moods. Mr. Moretti doesn't do upset the way most people do. He gets quiet, focused, dangerous. She met Lena's eyes directly. He's been all 3 since the lawsuit was filed, but not toward you, never toward you. The distinction felt important, though Lena wasn't quite sure why. She finished unpacking while Elena tactfully disappeared, leaving Lena alone in Adrian's bedroom, their bedroom now, at least in the eyes of anyone who might be watching. That evening, they had another event. A gallery opening for some artist whose work was apparently important enough to command the attendance of everyone who mattered. Lena wore one of Isabella's selections, a sleek black dress that managed to be both elegant and slightly dangerous. When she emerged from the master bedroom, a detail that felt significant, even though Adrian was nowhere in sight, she found him waiting at the bottom of the floating staircase. We need to talk about tonight, he said without preamble. The Wellingtons will be there. Margaret's probably already told everyone about the lawsuit, which means we'll face questions. What kind of questions? The kind designed to make you slip up, to get you to admit our marriage isn't real, or that you're being coerced, or that this is all some elaborate revenge plot. Adrian's expression was serious. They'll be subtle about it. Society types always are. But make no mistake, you're going to be interrogated. Lena straightened her shoulders, channeling the confidence Isabella's clothes gave her. Then I'd better have good answers. You do. The truth, modified for public consumption. He moved closer, his hand coming up to adjust the diamond necklace she wore, another loan from his apparently extensive jewelry collection. His fingers brushed her collarbone, the touch completely innocent and somehow intimate anyway. We fell in love quickly. We didn't want to wait. The timing in relation to your canceled wedding was unfortunate, but irrelevant because what we have is real. Is it? The question slipped out before Lena could stop it. Adrian's hand stilled on the necklace clasp. Is it what? Real. Any of this. Lena met his eyes, suddenly needing to understand what they were actually doing beyond the contracts and performances. We're living together, attending events as a couple, and now sharing a bedroom. At what point does pretending become something else? When we decide it does. Adrian's voice was carefully neutral. The contract gives us a framework, but what we do within that framework is up to us. If you want this to stay purely transactional, it stays transactional. If you want something more, I don't know what I want, Lena interrupted, the honesty feeling risky. A month ago, I was going to marry Marcus. 3 weeks ago, I signed your contract. 2 weeks ago, I watched you force his mother to apologize to me. And now we're about to go to another party and pretend to be in love while his family tries to destroy our marriage legally. She laughed, the sound slightly unsteady. I have no idea what's real anymore. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching hers with that unsettling intensity she'd never quite gotten used to. Then let's make something real, he said finally. Starting now. No more pretending when we're alone. When it's just us, we're honest. About what we're feeling, what we want, what this is becoming. And in public, we present whatever version serves our purposes. Can you work with that? The offer felt like stepping off a cliff into unknown territory, but Lena had already jumped off one cliff when she'd taken his hand on the cathedral steps. What was one more? Yes, she said. I can work with that. Good. Adrian's hand dropped from her necklace, the loss of contact more noticeable than it should have been. Then honestly, I'm furious about this lawsuit. Not because I'm worried about winning, Victoria will destroy their case, but because it's forcing you into a more intense version of our arrangement than you signed up for, and I don't like changing terms without your full consent. The admission surprised Lena with its directness. Honestly, I'm terrified, she countered, of the lawsuit, of what happens if we lose, of the fact that I'm starting to actually enjoy parts of this arrangement beyond just the revenge aspect, of the fact that when I wake up in your bedroom now, it doesn't feel as strange as it should. Adrian's expression shifted into something that might have been relief. See? That wasn't so hard. Honesty. Your turn, Lena challenged. Something actually honest, not just strategically vulnerable. He considered this, then spoke with the careful precision of someone revealing something he usually kept hidden. I didn't expect to like you. When I approached you on those cathedral steps, I saw an opportunity for leverage against the Wellingtons, a transaction that would benefit us both. But you're not who I thought you'd be. Who did you think I'd be? Easier to manipulate, more predictable, someone who'd play the role I assigned without developing her own agenda. His mouth curved slightly. Instead, you're inconveniently intelligent, surprisingly resilient, and forcing me to actually respect you as an equal rather than a useful asset. It's annoying. Lena felt a smile tug at her lips despite the tension. You're annoyed that I'm not a doormat? I'm annoyed that it matters to me whether you are or not, Adrian corrected. My life was simpler when I didn't care about the people I made deals with. The confession hung between them, weighted with implications neither seemed ready to fully examine. Finally, Adrian cleared his throat and stepped back, creating physical distance that felt deliberate. We should go, he said. We're already late, and making an entrance matters tonight. The gallery opening was in a converted warehouse in the Arts District, all exposed brick and industrial lighting designed to make the artwork pop. The crowd was the usual mix of wealth and wannabe sophistication, people who bought art because owning it meant something rather than because they actually appreciated it. Lena and Adrian's entrance caused the expected ripple of attention. Conversations paused, heads turned, and within seconds they were surrounded by people whose interest was thinly disguised as polite social interaction. Lena, darling, Patricia Hammond materialized with a champagne flute and predatory smile. I heard the most distressing news about a lawsuit, something about your marriage being fraudulent, and so it began. People say all kinds of things, Lena replied smoothly, years of practice with the Wellingtons making her voice steady, usually when they're upset about something they can't control. But surely you can understand why people might question the timing. Married within days of your previous engagement ending, to a man with quite the reputation. Patricia's eyes gleamed with barely concealed malice. It does look suspicious. Only if you believe I'm incapable of recognizing what I want and acting on it. Lena accepted a champagne flute from a passing waiter, using the moment to gather her thoughts. I spent 3 years trying to become someone Marcus Wellington's family could accept. Then I met someone who wanted me exactly as I am. The timing was irrelevant. How romantic, Patricia said, her tone suggesting she found it anything but. Though I have to ask, isn't it exhausting, constantly proving yourself to a new audience? At least with the Wellingtons you knew what was expected. Before Lena could respond, Adrian appeared at her elbow, his hand settling at the small of her back with possessive familiarity. The Wellingtons expected Lena to shrink herself to fit their narrow definition of acceptable. I expect her to take up all the space she deserves. If you find that exhausting, Patricia, perhaps you're identifying with the wrong person in this scenario. Patricia's expression soured. I'm simply concerned for Lena's well-being, given how quickly she's transitioned from one relationship to another. Your concern is noted and dismissed. Adrian's smile didn't reach his eyes. If you'll excuse us, I'd like to actually look at the art we're supposedly here to appreciate. He guided Lena away before Patricia could respond, navigating through the crowd with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent years at these events. Thank you, Lena said quietly. I could have handled her, but I know you could have. I wanted to handle her myself. Adrian's hand remained at her back, warm through the thin fabric of her dress. Consider it a perk of the arrangement. I get to shut down people who question you. They moved through the gallery, examining paintings and sculptures that Lena suspected neither of them particularly cared about, but the art provided cover for quieter conversations, moments where they could drop the performance slightly and just exist in the same space. There's Marcus, Adrian murmured near her ear. 3 o'clock, trying very hard to look like he's not watching you. Lena glanced over and saw him standing near a large, abstract canvas, champagne in hand, his attention fixed on her despite his attempt at casual disinterest. He looked terrible, circles under his eyes, his usually perfect appearance slightly disheveled, like he hadn't been sleeping well. He's going to approach, Lena predicted. Probably try one more time to convince me I've made a mistake. Do you want me to stay or give you space? The fact that Adrian asked rather than assuming surprised her. Stay, Lena decided. I think he needs to see us together, really see it, not just know it intellectually. Adrian's hand tightened fractionally at her back, the only acknowledgement of her request. They continued examining a sculpture that looked like twisted metal and existential crisis until Marcus finally worked up the courage to approach. Lena, he said, his voice carefully controlled. Adrian, I didn't expect to see you here. Margaret didn't tell you we'd be attending? Adrian's tone was pleasant, but there was steel underneath. She usually has excellent intelligence about guest lists. Marcus's jaw tightened. My mother's actions are her own. I'm not involved in the lawsuit. But you're not stopping it either, Lena observed. Which is kind of your signature move, isn't it? Letting other people do your dirty work while you maintain plausible deniability. The barb landed. Marcus flinched like she'd physically struck him. That's not fair. Neither was humiliating me at the altar, but we all make choices. Lena kept her voice level, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her rattled. What do you want, Marcus? To talk. Just for a minute, without... He gestured vaguely at Adrian. Without an audience. No, Lena said simply. Anything you need to say, you can say in front of my husband. The word husband seemed to hit Marcus harder than any insult could have. His expression crumpled slightly before he regained control, his lawyer training kicking in to lock down his emotions. Fine. I want you to know that I tried to talk my mother out of the lawsuit, told her it was pointless and vindictive and would only make everything worse. Marcus's eyes met Lena's, and for the first time since the cathedral, she saw genuine regret there. but she won't listen. She's convinced that if she can prove your marriage is fraudulent, you'll come back and we can fix everything. There's nothing to fix, Lena said quietly. What we had ended the moment you chose your family's approval over our relationship. Everything that's happened since has just been accepting that reality. I didn't choose them over you. I just needed time to figure out how to make everyone happy. You can't make everyone happy, Marcus. That's what you've never understood. Sometimes you have to choose, and your choices reveal your priorities. You chose wrong. Lena felt Adrian's steady presence beside her, a reminder that she wasn't alone in this conversation. I'm happy now, actually happy, not just grateful to be tolerated. Can you let me have that? Marcus looked between Lena and Adrian, something complicated crossing his features. Are you happy? Or are you just enjoying making me suffer? Both, Lena admitted. Is that terrible of me? Maybe. But you destroyed me publicly, and I'm allowed to feel satisfaction at watching you regret it. I do regret it. Marcus's voice dropped lower, barely audible over the gallery's ambient noise. Every day. Every time I see photos of you with him, looking like you've moved on so completely. It kills me, Lena. Good, Adrian said, his tone conversational, but his expression absolutely cold. It should kill you. You had something valuable and you threw it away because it required more courage than you possess. Now you get to watch someone else appreciate what you were too weak to keep. Marcus's face flushed red. This isn't about you, Moretti. This is between Lena and me. No, it's not. It stopped being between you and Lena the moment you publicly rejected her. You forfeited that intimacy. Adrian's hand moved from Lena's back to her waist, pulling her closer in a gesture that was clearly possessive. She's mine now. That's the reality you need to accept. The word mine should have bothered Lena, should have felt like objectification or control or a reduction of her personhood to property. Instead, it sent warmth spreading through her chest, a primal satisfaction at being claimed so definitively after years of being treated like she was never quite enough to keep. I'm not giving up, Marcus said, but the words lacked conviction. If the lawsuit fails, I'll find another way. To do what? Lena asked. Win me back? Marcus, I don't want to be won. I want to be valued, and you proved you don't know how to do that. Before Marcus could respond, a woman Lena recognized as one of the gallery owners approached with the bright smile of someone about to interrupt for professional reasons. I'm so sorry to intrude, but we're about to start the artist talk in the main space. I thought you might want to find seats. Of course, Adrian said smoothly. Thank you for letting us know. He guided Lena away from Marcus without a backward glance, leaving the other man standing alone near the twisted metal sculpture. As they walked, Lena felt the tension in Adrian's posture, the controlled anger that hadn't quite dissipated from the confrontation. That was intense, she said quietly. He needed to hear it, needed to understand that his window closed the moment he opened his mouth at that cathedral. Adrian's jaw was tight. Did I overstep? With the possessive display? No, Lena said honestly. It felt good to have someone defend me like that, to be claimed instead of just tolerated. Adrian looked at her sharply, something unreadable in his dark eyes. We should talk about that. Later, when we're home. The part where you liked being claimed. The promise of that conversation sent anticipation curling through Lena's stomach. Why later? Because we're in public, and this conversation requires honesty I can't give you with an audience. His hand squeezed her waist briefly. But we will talk about it. The artist's talk was exactly as pretentious as Lena expected. Lots of words like deconstructing societal paradigms and interrogating the viewer's relationship with consumption. She and Adrian sat in the back, maintaining the appearance of attentive interest, while his hand remained at her waist, his thumb occasionally tracing small circles against her hip bone through the fabric of her dress. The touch was probably unconscious, probably just part of the performance they were maintaining for the room full of witnesses. But it felt like more, like Adrian working something out through the repetitive motion, his mind elsewhere even as his body maintained their proximity. When the talk finally ended, they made the required rounds, thanking the hosts, examining a few more pieces of art, allowing themselves to be photographed together, looking elegant and affluent and completely united. By the time they climbed back into the Mercedes, Lena's feet ached from her heels, and her face hurt from smiling. That went well, Adrian observed as they pulled away from the gallery. You handled Marcus perfectly. Firm but not cruel, clear but not vindictive. I learned from watching you, Lena replied. The way you shut people down without losing your composure. It's effective. It's necessary in my world. If you show weakness, people exploit it. He was quiet for a moment. But you're not in my world by choice, not really. You're here because I offered you a way out of yours. And I'm grateful for that. But Adrian, I chose to take your hand on those steps. I chose to sign your contract. I chose to move into your bedroom even though we could have probably maintained appearances without that level of commitment. Lena turned to face him in the dim interior of the car. At some point, we have to acknowledge that I'm making active choices here, not just being swept along by your agenda. Adrian's expression was difficult to read in the low light. What are you saying? I'm saying the lines are blurring between what's performance and what's real, between what the contract requires and what I actually want. Lena took a breath, feeling like she was stepping off another cliff. You said we'd be honest when we're alone. So honestly, I don't know if I'm still pretending to be your wife or if I'm actually starting to feel like she's who I am. The confession hung between them as the Mercedes navigated through late-night traffic. Adrian didn't respond immediately, his attention seemingly fixed on the city lights passing outside his window. Finally he spoke, his voice carefully controlled. I promised you this would be a business arrangement. Clear terms, defined endpoint, no complications. If I'm making that impossible by... He stopped, searching for words. If my behavior is creating confusion about what this is, that's on me. I should be more careful about maintaining boundaries. What if I don't want you to maintain boundaries? The question escaped before Lena could consider whether asking it was wise. What if the confusion is because we're both pretending this is still just business, when it stopped being just business weeks ago? Adrian's head turned sharply, his dark eyes locking onto hers with sudden intensity. Lena, you asked me to be honest when we're alone, she interrupted. So here's honesty. I look forward to seeing you in the mornings. I miss you when you're gone all day with business meetings. I lie in your bed at night, wondering what would happen if you were actually there with me, instead of carefully maintaining your distance in a guest room. And I don't know if that's gratitude or proximity or something more, but I know it's real. The silence that followed felt massive, filling the car's interior with unspoken possibilities. Adrian's expression cycled through several emotions too quickly for Lena to identify before settling on something that looked like conflict. This is a complication neither of us needs, he said finally, but his voice lacked conviction. Maybe. Or maybe it's the natural evolution of two people spending this much time together, sharing this much of their lives, and actually liking each other beyond the transactional aspects. Lena held his gaze. Tell me honestly, am I alone in feeling this shift? Adrian was quiet for so long that Lena thought he might not answer. The Mercedes pulled through the gate to his property, up the drive to the house that had become her home. The driver parked and disappeared with professional discretion, leaving them alone in the car's dim interior. You're not alone, Adrian said finally, each word carefully measured. But that doesn't mean acting on it is wise. We have a contract, an arrangement with clear terms that protect both of us. If we introduce actual feelings into this equation, everything becomes exponentially more complicated. Life is complicated, Lena said. Pretending it isn't doesn't change that. No, but it creates structure, predictability, safety. Adrian's hand moved to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with surprising gentleness. I'm not a good bet for real feelings, Lena. I'm dangerous and ruthless, and I operate in worlds that destroy people who get too close. You signed up for a year of security and revenge. Not for whatever darkness comes with actually being part of my life beyond the performance. You don't get to decide what I can handle, Lena said softly. I've survived plenty already. I think I can manage whatever complications come with admitting this stopped being fake somewhere along the way. Adrian's hand dropped from her face, but his eyes stayed locked on hers. If we do this, if we acknowledge that this has become something more than our contract, we change everything. The power dynamics, the endpoint, the ease of walking away when the year is over. Are you prepared for that? Are you? Lena challenged. I don't know, Adrian admitted, the honesty stark. but I know I want to find out. The admission felt seismic, a fundamental shift in the foundation of their arrangement. Lena reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his in the darkness of the car. "Then let's find out together," she said. "No more pretending when we're alone. No more maintaining careful distance because we're afraid of complications. Just see what this actually is when we're not performing for audiences or protecting ourselves from hypothetical futures." Adrian's grip tightened on her hand. "This could be a terrible idea. Most of my best decisions recently have looked terrible from the outside," Lena said, thinking about taking his hand on the cathedral steps, signing a contract marriage, facing down the Wellingtons at fundraisers. "What's one more?" Adrian laughed, the sound low and slightly disbelieving. "You're either incredibly brave or completely reckless. Can't I be both?" "With you? Probably." He leaned forward, his forehead resting against hers in that same gesture he'd used for the photographers at the courthouse. But this time there were no cameras, no audience, no performance required. Just them in the quiet darkness, breathing the same air. Everything between them shifted and new and terrifying. "So what happens now?" Lena whispered. "Now we go inside," Adrian said, "and we figure out what being honest with each other actually looks like when we're not bound by contractual obligations or public performances." "Just us. Just us," he agreed. They climbed out of the Mercedes and walked into the house together, their hands still linked, everything about their arrangement fundamentally changed by admissions that couldn't be taken back. Whatever came next, lawsuits, public scrutiny, the remaining months of their contract, they would face it as something more than business partners. The exact definition of what they were becoming remained uncertain. But for the first time since signing Adrian's contract, Lena wasn't afraid of that uncertainty. She was ready to explore it. The house felt different when they stepped inside that night, like crossing a threshold had changed the molecular structure of the space itself. Elena had left the lights dimmed, a subtle glow illuminating the path to the stairs, and the silence felt weighted with possibility rather than emptiness. Adrian released Lena's hand once they reached the foyer, but the distance between them remained charged with everything they'd admitted in the car. He shrugged out of his jacket, draping it over the back of a chair with uncharacteristic carelessness. "Do you want something to drink?" he asked, his voice rougher than usual. "Elena left coffee ready, or there's wine." "Wine," Lena decided, needing something to do with her hands beyond resisting the urge to reach for him again. They moved to the kitchen together, Adrian pulling a bottle of red from the temperature-controlled cabinet, while Lena retrieved glasses from the shelf she'd learned held the everyday crystal. The domesticity of the moment felt surreal against the backdrop of their conversation, like they were playing house, except the house was real, and the feelings churning between them were becoming increasingly difficult to categorize. Adrian poured with steady hands, passing Lena a glass before leaning against the counter opposite her. The kitchen island created physical distance that felt both necessary and frustrating. "We should probably talk about what happens next," he said, swirling wine in his glass without drinking, "beyond the vague acknowledgement that we're not pretending anymore." "What do you want to happen next?" Lena asked, deciding that if they were doing honesty, she might as well push for it completely. Adrian's dark eyes met hers over the rim of his glass. "Honestly, I want to walk around this island, pull you against me, and kiss you until we both stop thinking so clearly about consequences. But that feels like moving too fast given that we had a contract marriage 5 minutes ago." The blunt admission sent heat flooding through Lena's body. "What if I want the same thing? Then we have a problem, because one of us should probably be the voice of reason." He finally took a drink, his expression suggesting the wine wasn't helping his self-control. "We've been living together for weeks without crossing physical lines beyond what appearances required. If we cross those lines now, everything changes." "Everything already changed," Lena pointed out. "The moment we admitted this stopped being purely transactional. We can either acknowledge that shift and adapt to it, or we can pretend we're still bound by rules that no longer apply and make ourselves miserable." "You're arguing for adaptation. I'm arguing for honesty, which includes being honest about attraction." Lena set down her wine glass with decisive finality. "I'm attracted to you, Adrian. Have been since before I probably should have been, given the circumstances. And I think you're attracted to me too, based on the way you've been looking at me when you think I won't notice." Adrian's mouth curved into something between a smile and a grimace. I've been that obvious? Not obvious, just not as careful as you think. Lena moved around the island, closing the distance between them until she stood directly in front of him, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body, to catch the scent of his cologne mixed with something darker and more complex. So here's my question. Are we going to keep dancing around this, or are we going to admit what we both want and deal with the complications as they come? Adrian set his own glass down, his hands coming to rest on the counter on either side of his hips, like he was physically restraining himself from reaching for her. If I kiss you right now, I won't want to stop. And I don't know if you're ready for what that means. Tell me what it means, Lena said, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. No metaphors, no vague warnings, actual honesty about what you're thinking. Adrian's eyes went almost black, his carefully maintained control visibly fracturing. It means I stop being the detached businessman who offered you a contract and become someone who actually wants you in ways that have nothing to do with leverage or revenge or public performances. It means I'll get possessive and demanding and probably territorial about you in ways that go far beyond what our arrangement requires. It means this stops being safe and predictable and becomes something neither of us can control. Good, Lena said simply. I'm tired of safe. Safe got me humiliated at an altar by a man who valued his mother's opinion more than my heart. Safe got me 3 years of shrinking myself to fit into spaces not designed for me. If this is dangerous and unpredictable, then at least it's real. Adrian moved so quickly that Lena barely registered the transition from standing apart to being pulled flush against him, his hands cupping her face with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the intensity in his eyes. Last chance to change your mind, he said, his voice rough with restraint. Once I kiss you, once we cross this line, I won't be able to go back to pretending you're just a contractual obligation. I don't want you to go back, Lena whispered, her hands coming up to grip his wrists. I want you to move forward. With me. Adrian's control shattered. He kissed her like he'd been holding back for weeks, which Lena suspected he had. The kiss was demanding and consuming and completely devoid of the careful performance they'd maintained in public. This was Adrian unfiltered, showing her exactly what he'd been restraining, and Lena met his intensity with her own, 3 weeks of proximity and attraction and unacknowledged wanting finally finding release. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers in that gesture that was becoming familiar. That was a terrible idea, he said, but his hands remained on her face, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. Probably, Lena agreed. Want to do it again anyway? His laugh was low and rough. Absolutely. This time when he kissed her, Lena let herself sink into it completely, let herself stop analyzing and questioning and just feel. Adrian's hands moved from her face to her waist, pulling her impossibly closer while Lena's fingers tangled in his hair. The kiss deepened, becoming something that promised far more than either of them could probably deliver standing in a kitchen at midnight. Adrian pulled back first, his breathing ragged. We should stop. Why? Lena's voice came out breathier than intended. Because if we don't stop now, I'm going to carry you upstairs to our bedroom, and we're going to have a very different conversation about what this arrangement has become. His dark eyes held hers. And I want you to be absolutely certain that's what you want before we get there. The fact that he was giving her an out, offering space to reconsider, made Lena want him even more. This wasn't manipulation or coercion or taking advantage of proximity. This was Adrian being careful with her even when his own control was clearly fractured. I'm certain, Lena said, but I appreciate you asking. Adrian's expression shifted into something predatory and promising. Then come upstairs with me. Not because the contract requires it, or because we're maintaining appearances. Because we both want this and we're done pretending otherwise. Lena took his extended hand, her pulse racing as he led her up the floating staircase to the master bedroom they'd been sharing in name only. Inside, the room looked exactly as it had when she'd left it hours ago to get ready for the gallery opening, but everything felt different now. This wasn't a performance space or a strategic adjustment to their arrangement. This was real. Adrian closed the door behind them with a soft click, the sound somehow final. Then he turned to Lena, his expression serious despite the desire still evident in his eyes. We can still stop, he said. We can go back to our separate rooms, Maintain the boundaries we've kept for weeks. Pretend this conversation never happened. I don't want to pretend anymore, Lena replied, reaching for him with steady hands. I want to know what's real between us. What followed was a revelation of honesty that had nothing to do with contracts or revenge, and everything to do with two people who'd been orbiting each other for weeks, finally allowing themselves to collide. Adrian was careful and demanding by turns, attentive to Lena's responses in ways that suggested he'd been thinking about this far longer than he'd admitted. And Lena, for the first time since signing his contract, let herself be completely vulnerable with someone who saw all of her and wanted her anyway. Later, much later, they lay tangled in sheets that no longer felt like props in a performance. Adrian's fingers traced lazy patterns on Lena's shoulder while she studied the city lights visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. This changes everything, Adrian said quietly, the words a statement rather than a question. I know, Lena replied. Is that a problem? It should be. I built my entire life on maintaining control and avoiding complications. You're the biggest complication I've ever willingly invited in. His hand stilled on her shoulder, but somehow I can't bring myself to regret it. Lena turned to face him, studying his expression in the dim light. What happens now? With the contract, the lawsuit, all of it. Now we fight the lawsuit and win. Now we continue appearing as the devoted couple we've apparently actually become. Now we figure out what this looks like beyond the year we agreed to. Adrian's dark eyes met hers. Unless you still want to walk away when the contract expires. Do you want me to walk away? No, he admitted, which should terrify me more than it does. I don't do attachments, Lena. I do transactions and strategic alliances and carefully managed relationships that serve specific purposes. But with me, you're stuck with someone inconveniently real, Lena finished, remembering his words from weeks ago. Someone who won't fit into neat categories or follow predictable patterns. Exactly. Adrian pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her with surprising tenderness. We should probably sleep. Victoria wants to meet tomorrow to discuss the lawsuit strategy, and that's going to require us both to be sharp. But neither of them slept immediately. Instead, they talked in whispers about everything and nothing. Her law school plans, his business concerns, the strange trajectory that had brought them from cathedral steps to this moment. Somewhere in the early hours of the morning, Lena finally drifted off wrapped in Adrian's arms, feeling safer and more certain than she had in years. She woke to sunlight streaming through windows she'd forgotten to cover, and Adrian already awake beside her, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite interpret. How long have you been awake? She asked, her voice rough with sleep. A while. I've been thinking about the lawsuit. He brushed hair back from her face with gentle fingers. And how to make absolutely certain we win. Victoria said their case was weak. It is. But Margaret Wellington is relentless when she wants something, and right now she wants to prove our marriage is fraudulent so Marcus can try to win you back. Adrian's expression hardened slightly. I need to make sure that's impossible. Not just unlikely or improbable. Impossible. How do you make something impossible? By removing her leverage entirely, by making our marriage so obviously legitimate that no judge would question it, and by resolving the debt situation in a way that eliminates their financial motivation for the lawsuit. He sat up, reaching for his phone on the nightstand. Which means I need to make some calls. Lena watched him work through the morning, phone pressed to his ear while he paced the bedroom in nothing but sleep pants, his voice alternating between coldly professional and dangerously soft depending on who he was talking to. By the time Elena knocked discreetly to announce breakfast, Adrian had apparently set several plans in motion that he explained to Lena in careful detail over coffee. I'm settling the Wellington debt, he said without preamble, not because they deserve it, but because I want it off the table as a complicating factor. They'll have their $7 million back, which removes any claim that our marriage is financially motivated. But you said that debt was leverage. It was. Now I have better leverage. His dark eyes held hers across the breakfast table. You. Us. The fact that what we have is real enough that their lawsuit looks like exactly what it is, a vindictive attempt to undo something they can't control. Adrian, $7 million is a rounding error compared to what I'm worth, he interrupted. And more importantly, it's worth it to protect what we're building. I won't let the Wellingtons destroy this because Margaret can't accept that her son lost you. The declaration made something warm bloom in Lena's chest. When did this stop being about revenge and start being about protection? Somewhere between you moving into my bedroom and me realizing I'd burn down the entire Wellington empire if it meant keeping you safe. Adrian said it like he was discussing the weather, casual and absolute. Is that going to be a problem? Only if you expect me not to feel the same way about you, Lena replied. I might not have your resources or connections, but I'm fairly invested in protecting what we're building too. Adrian's mouth curved into a genuine smile. We're a mess, aren't we? Started as a revenge plot and ended up actually caring about each other. The worst kind of mess, Lena agreed. The kind that might actually work. The lawsuit hearing happened 3 weeks later in a courtroom that was significantly less grand than the cathedral where this entire situation had begun. Lena sat beside Adrian at the defendant's table, Victoria on his other side with a briefcase full of evidence and an expression that suggested she was looking forward to destroying the Wellingtons' case. Across the aisle, Margaret and Marcus sat with their own legal team, their faces carefully neutral except for the flash of anger in Margaret's eyes every time she looked at Lena and Adrian together. The judge was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and an expression that suggested she didn't have patience for frivolous lawsuits. She reviewed the filed documents with increasing skepticism, her frown deepening as she read through the Wellingtons' claims. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, she said finally, looking over her reading glasses at the Wellington attorney. You're claiming that the defendant's marriage is fraudulent because it occurred too quickly after the plaintiff's son ended his engagement to Mrs. Moretti. We're claiming the marriage was entered into solely to damage our family's reputation and avoid legitimate debt collection, Your Honor, the attorney replied smoothly. The timing is merely one piece of evidence supporting that claim. What other evidence do you have? The attorney presented his case, testimony from people at the cathedral who'd witnessed Marcus's rejection of Lena, social media posts tracking the rapid progression of her relationship with Adrian, financial documents showing the Wellington debt, character witnesses who claimed Adrian Moretti was known for using personal relationships as business leverage. Victoria dismantled it all with surgical precision. She presented the marriage license, legally filed and completely legitimate. She produced the contract Lena and Adrian had signed, its terms clearly outlined and mutually beneficial in ways that had nothing to do with the Wellingtons. She called Sarah Brennan to testify that Lena had been fully informed and had separate legal counsel reviewing all documents before signing. Then Victoria played her trump card. Your Honor, I'd like to submit evidence that the debt the plaintiffs claim motivated this marriage has been paid in full as of 2 weeks ago. She handed documents to the judge. Mr. Moretti settled the outstanding balance of $7 million with no requirement for repayment or acknowledgement from the Wellington family. If this marriage was truly motivated by debt collection, that action makes no logical sense. The judge examined the documents, her eyebrows rising. Is this accurate? You paid a $7 million debt that you were under no obligation to pay? Adrian stood, his voice calm and clear. Yes, Your Honor. I wanted to remove any financial considerations from my marriage to ensure it could be evaluated on its own merits. What my wife and I have is real, and I won't let it be reduced to a business transaction by people who can't accept that she's moved on. Your wife, the judge repeated, looking at Lena. Mrs. Moretti, do you have anything you'd like to say? Lena stood, her hands remarkably steady considering the weight of the moment. Your Honor, I understand how the timing of my marriage looks. I understand that it appears rushed and possibly motivated by revenge. But the truth is that Adrian gave me something Marcus Wellington never did. The certainty that I was wanted exactly as I am. No conditions, no requirements to change or shrink myself to fit someone else's standards. If that happened quickly, it's because I'd already wasted 3 years with someone who didn't value me. I wasn't willing to waste any more time. The courtroom was silent as Lena sat back down. Across the aisle, Marcus looked like he'd been gutted, his face pale and his hands clenched into fists on the table. The judge reviewed her notes for several long minutes before speaking. I've heard enough. The plaintiffs have failed to provide compelling evidence that this marriage is fraudulent beyond their own discomfort with its timing. Adults are allowed to marry quickly if they choose to do so. The fact that Mrs. Moretti's previous engagement ended badly doesn't invalidate her current marriage. She looked directly at Margaret Wellington. In fact, The only evidence of vindictiveness I see in this courtroom is the filing of this lawsuit itself, which appears designed to harass and intimidate the defendants rather than address any legitimate legal concern. Margaret's face flushed with barely contained fury. "Case dismissed," the judge declared, her gavel coming down with decisive finality. "And Mrs. Wellington, I'd suggest you accept that your son's former fiancé has moved on. Continuing to pursue this matter will only result in sanctions against you and your family." The gavel's echo seemed to reverberate through the courtroom with the weight of something ending. Victoria gathered her documents with the satisfied efficiency of someone who'd never doubted the outcome. Beside Lena, Adrian's hand found hers under the table, his grip warm and grounding. Across the aisle, Margaret stood with the rigid posture of someone who'd just suffered a public defeat. She spoke briefly to her attorney before turning to fix Lena with a look of pure venom. "This isn't over," she said quietly, her voice carrying across the aisle. "You may have won today, but you'll never truly be accepted in our world. You'll always be the girl who—" "Who what?" Adrian interrupted, standing to his full height with an expression that made even Margaret pause. "Who refused to let your family destroy her? Who found someone who actually values her? Who's moving on with her life while your son regrets every choice that led him to lose her?" He smiled, cold and absolutely devastating. "Lena doesn't need your acceptance, Margaret. She never did. That was the mistake you made from the beginning." Margaret's mouth opened, then closed, apparently finding no response that wouldn't make the situation worse. She turned sharply and strode from the courtroom, her attorney scrambling to follow. Marcus remained frozen in his seat, his eyes fixed on Lena with an expression of such complete devastation that she almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "Congratulations," Victoria said briskly, snapping her briefcase closed. "Your marriage is officially legitimate, the lawsuit is dismissed, and the Wellingtons now have no legal recourse to challenge your relationship. I'd call that a successful morning." "Thank you, Victoria," Adrian said, shaking her hand, "for everything. Just doing my job, though I'll admit this case was more entertaining than most." She glanced between Adrian and Lena, something knowing in her expression. "Take care of each other. I have a feeling you actually will." After Victoria left, Adrian and Lena remained in the courtroom for a moment, the space feeling larger now that it was mostly empty. "It's really over," Lena said, the reality of it settling in. "The lawsuit, the threat of annulment, all of it." "That part is over," Adrian agreed, "but we still have to decide what comes next. For us." "What do you mean?" Adrian turned to face her fully, his dark eyes serious. "The contract specified 1 year. We're 4 months in, which means we have 8 months until the agreed endpoint, at which point you're free to take your settlement and build whatever life you want. Law school, new city, fresh start away from all of this." He paused, "unless that's not what you want anymore." The question hung between them, weighted with implications. Lena thought about the woman she'd been 4 months ago, desperate and humiliated on cathedral steps, willing to sign a contract with a stranger just to escape the pain of rejection. She thought about everything that had happened since, the careful performances, the gradual shift from pretense to reality, the night she'd stopped pretending and let herself feel what had been building between them. "What do you want?" she asked Adrian. "I want you to stay," he said simply. "Not because a contract requires it, not because we're maintaining appearances, because I've gotten used to you being in my life and I don't want to go back to what it was like before." "That's terrifying," Lena said honestly. 4 months ago, I thought I'd spend my life with Marcus. That fell apart spectacularly. What makes you think we won't fall apart too?" "Nothing makes me think that. Nothing guarantees this works." Adrian stepped closer, his hands coming up to frame her face. "But the difference is we're choosing this knowing all the risks. You know who I am, the good and the bad, and the morally gray. I know who you are beyond the performance. We're not building this on illusions or unmet expectations. We're building it on honesty." "Brutal honesty," Lena added, remembering their conversations. "The best kind." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "So here's my honest question. Do you want to stay after the contract expires? Do you want to see what this becomes when we're not operating under predetermined terms?" Lena thought about law school, about the settlement money that would give her independence, about the future she'd been planning that involved walking away from this arrangement with her dignity restored and her life back on track. That future still existed. She could still take it if she wanted. But somewhere in the past 4 months, she'd stopped wanting a life away from Adrian and started wanting a life with him. "I want to stay," she said. "I want to go to law school here, in this city, and come home to you every night. I want to keep attending events together, except now we won't be pretending. I want to figure out what being actually married to you looks like when we're not performing for an audience or hiding behind contracts." Adrian's expression shifted into something that looked like relief mixed with disbelief. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything," Lena replied. "This started as revenge and became something real. I'm ready to see where real takes us." He kissed her then, right there in the empty courtroom, with no witnesses and no cameras and no ulterior motives beyond wanting to. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers in that gesture that had become theirs. "We should probably tell Victoria to modify the contract," he said. "Extend the term indefinitely, remove the settlement clause, adjust it to reflect an actual marriage instead of a business arrangement. Or," Lena suggested, "we could just live our lives without a contract dictating the terms. Trust that we'll figure it out as we go." Adrian pulled back to look at her, surprise evident in his expression. "You want to operate without clear parameters? That doesn't sound like you." "Maybe I'm learning that not everything needs to be controlled and predicted. Maybe some things are better when you just let them evolve naturally." Lena smiled. "You've taught me that sometimes the best outcomes come from taking risks. This feels like one worth taking. You're absolutely sure about this?" "Stop asking if I'm sure and just accept that I'm staying." Adrian's laugh was warm and genuine. "Yes, ma'am." They left the courthouse hand in hand, emerging into afternoon sunlight that felt symbolic of something ending and something else beginning. The Mercedes was waiting at the curb, but Adrian paused before they reached it, pulling Lena to a stop on the courthouse steps. "I need to say something," he began, his expression serious. "When I approached you at the cathedral, I saw an opportunity, a way to get leverage over the Wellingtons and maybe help someone who'd been treated badly in the process. I didn't expect to care about you beyond the strategic value you represented." "I know," Lena said quietly, "but you became more than strategy. You became someone I looked forward to seeing every morning. Someone whose opinions I valued, whose strength I admired, whose presence made my life better in ways that had nothing to do with business advantages." His hands tightened on hers. "I'm not good at emotional declarations, Lena. I'm much better at contracts and negotiations and clearly defined terms. But I need you to know that what I feel for you is real, completely, terrifyingly real." Lena felt tears prick her eyes, the emotional honesty in Adrian's words landing with devastating accuracy. "I love you too," she said, the declaration feeling both natural and revolutionary. "I probably have for weeks, but I was too scared to admit it because it meant this stopped being safe and controlled and became something that could actually hurt me." "I can still hurt you," Adrian warned. "I'm not perfect, Lena. I'm ruthless in business, I operate in moral gray areas, and I don't always make choices that nice people would approve of. I don't need you to be perfect. I need you to be honest and loyal and willing to fight for us when things get complicated. Can you do that?" "Absolutely," Adrian said without hesitation. "I'll fight for us until there's nothing left to fight against." "Then that's enough." They stood on the courthouse steps, the sun warm on their faces, everything between them laid bare and honest. People passed by without paying attention, just another couple having a moment in a city full of moments. No one watching would guess they'd just won a lawsuit that started as a revenge plot and ended in something that looked remarkably like love. The drive home was quiet, both of them processing the weight of what had just happened and what they'd just committed to. When they arrived at the house, Elena met them at the door with an expression that suggested she already knew the outcome. "Congratulations on your victory," she said warmly. "I've prepared a celebratory dinner for this evening." "Thank you, Elena," Adrian said. "That's perfect." That evening, they ate dinner on the terrace overlooking the city, the same view that had been the backdrop to so many of their conversations over the past months. But everything felt different now, lighter somehow, like pressure had been released that Lena hadn't fully realized was there. "I need to tell you something," she said as they finished dessert. "About law school." Adrian's attention sharpened. "Did you make a decision about which program?" "I got accepted to the program here. Full scholarship, just like you promised to support anyway." Lena twisted her wine glass, watching the light refract through the crystal. But they're also offering a specialty track in corporate law. It's competitive, focused on contract negotiation and business relationships. That sounds perfect for you. It does, but it also means I'd be studying exactly the kind of law you use in your business, which means I could be useful to you professionally beyond just being your wife. She met his eyes directly. And I need to know if you're okay with that, with me potentially becoming someone who understands your world well enough to be an actual partner in it, not just someone you protect from it. Adrian was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. You want to be involved in my business operations? I want to understand them. I want to be someone you can talk to about deals and negotiations without having to simplify or hide the complicated parts. I want to be your equal in this, not just someone you come home to after making all the real decisions. Lena leaned forward. But only if that's something you want. If you prefer to keep those worlds separate, I don't, Adrian interrupted. I never wanted to keep them separate. I kept them separate because I thought you'd prefer not to know the details of how I actually operate. But if you're willing to see all of it, understand all of it, maybe even help me navigate it more ethically when I'm tempted to cut corners. He smiled slightly. Then yes, I want you as a partner in every sense of the word. Even if I disagree with your methods sometimes. Especially then, I need someone who'll challenge me when I'm wrong, not just agree with everything I say. Adrian reached across the table to take her hand. You're already making me better, Lena, making me think about consequences and ethics in ways I haven't bothered with in years. If law school gives you the tools to do that more effectively, then I'm all for it. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, plans for the upcoming weeks, events they'd attend, the trip Adrian wanted to take once Lena's law school schedule was settled. They talked late into the night until the city lights below began to thin and exhaustion finally pulled them inside. In the master bedroom that had evolved from a strategic arrangement to their actual shared space, Lena changed into the silk pajamas that had become her nightly routine while Adrian went through his own evening preparations. The domesticity of it still sometimes caught her by surprise. The fact that this powerful, dangerous man brushed his teeth and checked his phone before bed, just like anyone else. What are you smiling about? Adrian asked, catching her expression in the mirror. Just thinking about how normal this has become. 4 months ago, I couldn't have imagined any of this, and now I can't imagine anything else. He came up behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder as they both looked at their reflection. We're quite the pair, aren't we? The girl who was supposed to marry into old money, and the man who built his empire by breaking all their rules. The perfect scandal, Lena agreed, leaning back against him. Except we're not scandalous anymore. We're just us. Just us, Adrian repeated, the words carrying weight. I like the sound of that. They climbed into bed together, the routine comfortable now in ways that still felt miraculous. Adrian pulled Lena against him, her back to his chest, his arms secure around her waist. Thank you, he said quietly into the darkness. For what? For taking my hand on those cathedral steps. For being brave enough to sign a contract with a stranger. For staying when you could have walked away. His arm tightened around her. For choosing this even when it got complicated. Thank you for offering your hand in the first place, Lena replied. For seeing something in me worth protecting. For giving me the space to become someone stronger than I was. For loving me when I finally stopped pretending I didn't love you back. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, the city lights their only witness to a moment that felt like an ending and a beginning simultaneously. The months that followed were a study in building something real from foundations that had started as pure strategy. Lena started law school with a ferocity that surprised even her, diving into contracts and negotiations with the intensity of someone who'd lived through their consequences. Adrian attended her important presentations and study group meetings, offering insights from his years of experience while learning to respect her developing expertise. They attended events together, no longer performing but simply existing as the couple they'd actually become. People talked, of course. Society types loved nothing more than a good scandal-turned romance. But the talk shifted from malicious speculation to reluctant acceptance to eventually something approaching respect. Even the Wellingtons eventually retreated from their campaign against Lena and Adrian's marriage. Marcus moved to the West Coast, taking a position at a firm far from his mother's influence. Margaret remained bitter but silent, Her social standing damaged enough by the lawsuit that she couldn't afford to continue making enemies. 6 months after the courthouse victory, Lena came home from a particularly brutal study session to find Adrian in his study, surrounded by documents and looking unusually contemplative. "What's wrong?" she asked, reading the tension in his shoulders. "Not wrong, just thinking." He gestured for her to join him. "I've been approached about a development deal, major project, very lucrative, would cement my position in the market for the next decade." "That sounds like good news." "It is. Except the project involves displacing low-income residents from a building that's being renovated into luxury condos. Legal, profitable, and exactly the kind of morally gray situation I would have jumped at a year ago without a second thought." Adrian's dark eyes met hers. "But now I have someone who'll ask me if profit is worth the human cost. So I'm asking myself before you have to ask me." Lena settled into the chair across from his desk. "What did you decide?" "That I don't want to be the person who destroys communities for profit anymore. That maybe it's time to start using my resources to build things that actually help people instead of just enriching myself." He leaned back, studying her. "I'm turning down the deal. Instead, I'm going to buy the building and renovate it as affordable housing. It'll cost me significantly more and make me significantly less, but it feels right." "When did you become someone who cares about what feels right?" "When I fell in love with someone who makes me want to be better than I was." Adrian's expression was serious. "You've changed me, Lena. Made me question motives I never bothered examining before. Made me want to build a life I can be proud of instead of just a fortune I can leverage." Lena felt her throat tighten with emotion. "You're giving me too much credit." "I'm giving you exactly the right amount of credit. You saw me at my most calculating and chose to stay anyway. The least I can do is become someone worthy of that choice." He stood, rounding the desk to pull her up and into his arms. "I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that you made the right decision on those cathedral steps." "You already have," Lena said, her arms wrapping around his waist. "Every single day since then, you've proven it." 1 year after their contract was signed, they threw a party. Not because the contract required them to celebrate its anniversary, but because they wanted to mark the moment that had changed both their lives irrevocably. They invited everyone who mattered: Victoria and Sarah, Isabella, Elena, even some of Lena's law school classmates who'd become genuine friends. The party was elegant but relaxed, held at the house that had become their shared home in every meaningful sense. People mingled on the terrace, drinking champagne and watching the sunset paint the city in shades of gold and amber. Late in the evening, Adrian found Lena alone for a moment, looking out at the view that had become so familiar. "Happy anniversary," he said, handing her a fresh glass of champagne. "Of our fake marriage that became real?" Lena accepted the glass with a smile. "What a thing to celebrate." "Best decision I ever made, offering you that contract." "Best decision I ever made, accepting it." She leaned against him, comfortable in his presence in ways that still sometimes amazed her. "Though I think we can agree the whole thing was completely insane." "The best things usually are." Adrian was quiet for a moment. "I have something for you." He pulled a small box from his pocket, the size and shape immediately recognizable. Lena's breath caught. "Adrian, I know we're already married. I know we don't need rings or proposals or any of the traditional romantic gestures." He opened the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring, elegant and understated and completely perfect. "But I want to do this right. I want to give you the proposal you deserved the first time, the one that's about love instead of strategy." He dropped to one knee right there on the terrace, heedless of their guests or the performance aspect or anything beyond the two of them in that moment. "Lena Carter Moretti, will you stay married to me? Not because a contract binds you, not because it's convenient or strategic or serves any purpose beyond the fact that I love you and want to spend my life with you. Will you choose me every day the way I choose you?" Lena felt tears streaming down her face, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. "Yes," she managed. "Yes, absolutely yes." Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and kissed her while their guests erupted in applause. When they finally broke apart, Lena held up her hand to examine the ring, the diamonds catching the last rays of sunset. "It's perfect," she said. "You're perfect." "I'm really not," Adrian corrected. But I'm trying to be for you. Then we're both trying to be better, Lena said. Together. As the party continued around them and the sun finally set on the city below, Lena thought about the woman she'd been 1 year ago. Broken and humiliated on cathedral steps, convinced that her world had ended. She'd had no way of knowing that her ending was actually a beginning, that the stranger who'd offered his hand would become the person she'd choose every single day for the rest of her life. The sweetest revenge, it turned out, wasn't destroying the people who'd hurt her. It was becoming someone so complete, so confident, so genuinely happy that their opinions no longer mattered. It was finding love in the last place she'd expected it, and having the courage to claim it fully. It was standing on a terrace wearing a dress that cost more than her old life, a ring that symbolized a choice rather than an obligation, and knowing with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. Marcus Wellington had thought he was too good for her, that she was beneath his family's standards. He'd been catastrophically wrong. Not because Lena had climbed high enough to meet those standards, but because she'd found someone who understood that she'd always been above them. And that, Lena thought as Adrian pulled her close, and their guests raised their glasses in celebration, was the best ending she could have imagined. Not because she'd gotten revenge on the people who'd hurt her, but because she'd found something infinitely better than revenge. She'd found herself.